Chapter 689. I heard that you had a grudge with the cowboys here during the day? Prawalton raised his head and looked at Jiang Hai in front of him. He had to admit that doing that kind of thing was addictive. They were busy during the day. When they returned to the hotel at night, Prawalton and Cheryl Lee didn't even have the leisure to eat. Instead, they directly pulled Jiang Hai into the room. When they stopped, Jiang Hai had to sit up helplessly and prepare to order some food. He hadn't eaten yet. Yeah, I had some conflicts with them. I told you, I hate the people here. Jiang Hai spread his hands and said to Prawalton with some speechlessness. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton couldn't help but laugh. As a person of color, it was indeed not easy to make a living in Texas. According to the statistics of the United States, pure whites accounted for 52% of the population here. This was calculated more than 10 years ago. Now, it would only be higher than this, not lower than this. The second was Mexican. After all, this place was occupied by Mexico before. Blacks, who accounted for a large proportion of the population in the United States, only accounted for 11.5% here. Germans accounted for 9%, and Irish accounted for 7.2%. The unemployment rate of people of color here was as high as 90%. 95.3% of people of color couldn't live here for a lifetime. They would always leave for one reason or another. It could be said that this was a paradise for white people. Even compared to Boston, the birthplace of racial discrimination, this place was worse. There was no other way. The people here were tough, and a large proportion of them were cowboys. These people were stubborn as hell.
He was just like that.
You could do whatever you wanted, and they were very united. Therefore, whether it was the state government or the United States government, there was nothing they could do about these people. Even though there were clear rules, they still scolded and scolded as they should. Anyway, they didn't have any money to pay. If anyone dared to arrest them, a group of cowboys would surround the police station and cause trouble. This sentence was not wrong at all in this case. As a businessman, you have to learn to hide your emotions so that others can't see your happiness and anger. Only then can you gain the upper hand at the discussion table. You're still too emotional now. Prawalton looked at the menu in Jiang Hai's hand and smiled. He didn't care that a certain part of his body was squeezed out of shape by Jiang Hai's chest. Well, it seems that I'm not a qualified businessman. Jiang Hai shrugged and said indifferently, These cowboys are very united. They can't do anything to you now, but after the exhibition starts the day after tomorrow, I don't know. You have to be prepared for them to target you. Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton said seriously. Although she didn't know what these people would do, offending these bastards was indeed not a good thing. Well, this is a problem. Okay, I'll pay attention to it. Hearing Prawalton's words, Jiang Hai froze for a moment. But in his view, these people may only send people to find fault with him. That's all. If someone dares to come over and show off, then Jiang Hai doesn't mind letting them know why the flowers are so red. Jiang Hai's temper is not very good. I want to eat this. Cheryl, what do you want to eat? After finishing the business, Prawalton pointed at the menu and said. At the same time, she kicked Cheryl Lee in Jiang Hai's arms and asked her, I'm a little sleepy. I don't really want to eat. I'll just eat something. Cheryl Lee opened her eyes in a daze and said with a smile. Her physical fitness was far worse than Prawalton's. Don't forget, when they were in New York, this girl was abnormally crazy. Jiang Hai was afraid of hurting her body, so he injected a lot of aura into her. Because of this, her current physical fitness was quite good. After fighting with Jiang Hai, she would be able to recover in about 8 to 10 minutes. But for ordinary people like Cheryl Lee, they wouldn't be able to get out of bed easily in less than half an hour. You still have to eat something. What do you want to eat? Taking away Prawalton's little foot, Jiang Hai put his hand on Cheryl Lee's back, patted it gently, and said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee forced herself to be alert. Anything is fine, but I want you to feed me. Feed me mouth to mouth. Looking at Jiang Hai, Cheryl Lee said with a smile. You little slut. Listening to Cheryl Lee's request, Prawalton couldn't help but roll her eyes. This girl is really shameless. Jiang Hai listened to her and agreed with a smile. Then she happily ordered some spaghetti. After dinner was served, the three of them gathered together and had a delicious meal. However, Prawalton ate by herself, while Cheryl sat naked on Jiang Hai's lap and let Jiang Hai feed her. Looking at the scene in front of her, Prawalton couldn't help but curl her lips. After eating, she directly threw Cheryl on the bed. It seemed that she was going to reinvigorate herself. The next 2 days could be said to be calm. It was not an exaggeration to use this word to describe it. The person who fancied Prawalton and wanted to harass her didn't appear. The cowboys were also temporarily honest. It seemed that they were holding back their evil intentions and were waiting for the start of the exhibition to find trouble with Jiang Hai. So in the past few days, Jiang Hai and the others paid special attention, but it was in vain. The other party didn't make any excessive moves. In the blink of an eye, it was time for the exhibition to begin. After all, it was a Texas livestock exhibition. Although the Americans didn't like gongs and drums, firecrackers, red flags, and a sea of people, it was still very lively and quite impressive. It was just that it lacked a lot of formalities. At 6:00 in the morning, Jiang Hai and the others brought their cows to their own exhibition hall. The layout of the exhibition hall was much better than that of the cowshed. Each cow lived in a separate compartment. The compartment was surrounded by iron fences, allowing the cows to graze freely. Meanwhile, people could observe the situation of the cows from all directions. This was also the standard of the judges for the first 3 days. After the cows were sent to the exhibition hall, Jiang Hai also received the details of the evaluation. The first 3 days were to evaluate the appearance of the cows, the size, the color of their hair, the brightness of their eyes, the tidiness of their teeth, whether there were any congenital defects, and so on. These were all things that had to be looked at. Each cow had its own independent interface. These judges would hide in the crowd and walk in to look at the cows. Then they would give the cows a score. The highest score was 10, and the lowest score was 0. There were also 8 options for scoring, which were similar to what was described above. Jiang Hai didn't look too carefully, but he knew that in terms of Angus cattle, his cows were worthy of being kings. Even if they were compared to other cows, he wouldn't be afraid. After looking at the situation, Jiang Hai didn't care about Robbins Garcia and the others who were very nervous around him. He slowly walked out of the exhibition hall. Jiang Hai had won 2 million points of confidence in his beef cows. He didn't even have confidence in his cows. Walking out of the exhibition hall, Jiang Hai also looked at the people around him. He had to admit that the Texas Yak Show was much bigger than the one in New York. Although he didn't like the people here, the cows here were indeed the most abundant in the United States, no, even the world. It was also very good. According to the display above, the Texas Yak Show was divided into 2 areas, namely the animal husbandry area and the rodeo area. The rodeo area was much smaller than the animal husbandry area. Starting from the preliminary round, there were a total of 3 major events: equestrian, goat snatching, and bull riding. Equestrian was divided into equestrian taming and horsemanship. Horsemanship was to ride a horse through obstacles. It wasn't the kind of dressage, but the kind of competition that tested a cowboy's horsemanship.
It was the same for goat snatching.
Among a flock of sheep, who could find the target sheep the fastest. Of course, it wasn't based on the sheep's face, but on the sheep's body. But whoever rode the horse first and carried the sheep from the flock to the finish line would be the winner. The last one was bull riding. Jiang Hai had seen this before in the country's imperial court. It was just some simple protective gear, and then ride on a mad bull to see who could last the longest. This competition was also the most dangerous one. First, it was really dangerous to fall from the bull's back. Second, the mad bull might attack the rider, who fell to the ground. Every year, people would be injured or even killed in this competition. But in the United States, especially in the cowboy circle, this competition was the most eye-catching. The 3 competitions were divided into 3 days. After 3 days, the 64 people with the best results would enter the finals and start competing again. Obviously, ordinary tourists preferred to see the cowboys. So, early in the morning, the cowboy arena was already full of people. On the other hand, Jiang Hai's side was deserted, but no one was in a hurry. There was nothing to be anxious about because the selection here wasn't like the cowboys who fought for their own glory. They were here to do business. The tourists went to see the people, but the businessmen came to see the cows. This was the real money. Compared to the New York Beef Show, the Animal Husbandry Show's exhibition hall was about 5 times bigger than the one in New York. The security was more decent, and there were more exhibition halls. There wasn't anything messy, and there was no voting for tourists. *T, the place here was bigger and more professional. At least in this respect, Zhang Hai had to admit that Texas was really good. Get out of the way, get out of the way, get out of the way. But just as Zhang Hai was standing at the door, a slightly panicked voice suddenly came from the distance. Then, Zhang Hai turned his head and saw a stinky cart filled with cow dung running towards him quickly. Seeing this scene, Zhang Hai subconsciously wanted to get out of the way, but the cart seemed to be targeting him and ran straight towards him. Who the F***? Zhang Hai's reaction was not slow, but the cart was faster. At the same time, Zhang Hai glanced around and found that the cowboys nearby were looking at him with smiles on their faces. Of course, there was also a trace of strong disdain. Seeing that the cart full of cow dung was about to hit Zhang Hai instantly jumped back and dodged the cart. The people behind the cart didn't think that Zhang Hai could actually dodge at such a fast speed. They were stunned for a moment. But this person was worthy of being called a ruthless person. Since he couldn't hit Zhang Hai, he directly did it. His hand tilted, and the cart full of cow dung fell directly towards Zhang Hai. Seeing the scene, Zhang Hai immediately took a few steps back. But although he retreated beyond the safety line, the cart of cow dung was directly in front of his exhibition hall in an instant. A stench came from under the cart, making the people who were originally walking on this road subconsciously retreat to the side. What do you mean by this? Looking at the cow dung in front of his door, Zhang Hai's eyes were about to spit fire. He thought about it and understood that this guy should be in cahoots with those cowboys. The reason why he did such a thing was that those cowboys made a move. What do you mean by What do you mean? You just want to watch my cart fall down? Didn't you say that huaxia is the help of etiquette? Why don't you want to touch the cart for me? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the man couldn't help but put his hands on his waist and said with an angry face. Hearing his unreasonable words, Zhang Hai laughed. He had seen shameless people, but he had never seen such a shameless person. Why would he touch the dung cart for him? Help of etiquette? Is help of etiquette used for this? I'll help your uncle. Hurry up and get these things out of here. Looking at the man in front of him, Zhang Hai's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. Oh, I won't do it.
Hit me if you can.
However, the man in front of him was really shameless. He looked straight at Zhang Hai and said. Hearing this man's annoying words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but clench his fists, but fortunately, he held back. If he made the first move, he wasn't afraid of the police and money, but the exhibition hall would be destroyed. Boss, calm down. Call security. At this time, Robbins Garcia came out of the exhibition hall and looked at the angry Zhang Hai. He pulled Zhang Hai to the wind, then said something to Zhang Hai, then called Birkdahl. In fact, he didn't need to say anything. Birkdahl had already contacted the security guards. The quality of the security guards here was very good. Soon, a group of security guards rushed over, but when they arrived, they couldn't help but cover their noses and retreat far away. It should be known that cows were quite smelly. Cows especially like to fart, and their poop was especially smelly. The smell was really pungent. Looking at the situation in front of them, they couldn't help but look at Zhang Hai and the man pushing the cart. What's the meaning of this? Chapter 690. Sir, what's going on here? Looking at the pile of cow dung in front of him, the security guard looked at Zhang Hai and asked carefully. You're asking me? Go and ask that fellow who ordered him to dump the cow dung here. Hearing the security guard's words, Zhang Hai pointed to the man standing in the distance with an indifferent look and said to him, Barton, what's going on here? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the security guard here walked in front of the man and asked him. It can be seen that this cowboy named Barton should be an old man here, otherwise, it's impossible for the security guard to recognize him. It's nothing. I was just pushing cow dung, and I pulled my hand and accidentally fell over, that's all. Hearing the security guard's words, the cowboy named Barton didn't say anything bad about Jiang Hai. There are cameras everywhere here. If he wants to say more, he can directly change the camera. He will be even more passive, so instead of this, it's better for him to just say it. Then why don't you hurry up and clean up here? Hearing Barton admit it like this, the security guard didn't expect him to admit it so quickly. He thought that he would pester him for a while, but he didn't expect him to admit it so quickly. Since he admitted it, it's easy to deal with it. Whoever is responsible will deal with it. Oh, didn't you hear what I said just now? I pulled my hand, and now I can't use my hand, so I can't do anything about it. I'm going to the hospital, sorry. Barton shrugged and said to the security guard, then turned around and left. Stop. You poured this pile of cow dung in front of my door. Now you don't clean it up for me, and you still want to leave? Looking at this guy, Jiang Hai's face was really black. He really didn't think that these cowboys would really do such a disgusting thing. Yes, these guys are not looking for trouble with Jiang Hai, they're just disgusting him. And the most important thing is that by doing this, the judges hidden among the public will not come close to Jiang Hai's exhibition hall. No matter how good his cow dung is, no one will come to see it. So what's the use? Even if the judges endured the stench and came in, they wouldn't be able to withstand the stench. It was also impossible for them to take a closer look at his cow. If they were to casually give him a score and leave, the one who would suffer losses would be Jiang Hai. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai really wanted to go up and punch this guy, but he knew that he couldn't do it in broad daylight. I'm really sorry, but my hand is injured. You can't ask someone with an injured hand to work, right? This is the United States. We have to talk about human rights and freedom here. Barton looked at Jiang Hai. Although he apologized, there was a trace of disdain and pride on his face. He wanted to mess with Jiang Hai. He wanted to do it openly. Even if he was injured, who could do anything about it? You. Hearing Barton's words, Jiang Hai's eyes narrowed, and he couldn't help but take a step forward. However, Barton smiled and retreated, leaving just like that. Boss, what do we do now? Do you want me to catch him and teach him a lesson? Seeing Barton leave and Jiang Hai can't do anything to him, Belle Lester couldn't help but frown. He walked to Jiang Hai's side and asked him, "We can't just do it. What about Robbins now?" Jiang Hai patted Belle's shoulder and looked at Robbins Garcia and said. He gave Jiang Hai a reassuring look and walked directly to the security guard who was still standing here. "I want to see your manager. Tell him to come and see me." Robbins Garcia looked at the security guard in front of him and said calmly, You want to see our manager? What's the matter?" When they heard that they wanted to see the manager, not only the domestic staff would be a little scared, but these security guards would also be a little scared, so they looked at Robbins Garcia and said, "Look at our exhibition hall. I think you work here, so you should be familiar with it. We spent a total of $3 million to rent this exhibition hall for 7 days. $3 million. Now there is a pile of cow dung in front of our exhibition hall. I want to ask the manager, here, what's the meaning of this? Now I want to change the exhibition hall, or according to the contract, triple the compensation." Robbins Garcia looked at the security guard in front of him and said with a serious face. Hearing his words, the security guard here sweated all of a sudden. Perhaps for the exhibition, triple the compensation is not a lot, but this money is in the pockets of these people. How can they spit it out? If they have to pay $9 million, they definitely won't take the money, and it is very likely that they will vent their anger on the security guard. This is a mistake in our work. I don't think we should alarm the manager. As for this pile of cow dung, I'll take care of it. After thinking for a while, the security guard said hesitantly. People under the eaves had no choice but to lower their heads. Now, he was already cursing Barton in his heart. Of course, there was also Robbins Garcia. These damn foreigners, but he couldn't say that out loud. After hesitating for a while, the security guard looked at his subordinates, but when he looked at them, these security guards politely avoided his gaze. What a joke. They can smell the cow dung. Whoever wants to do it can do it. Anyway, they don't want to do it. They can't earn much money a day as security guards here. When the time comes, they will be smelly and disgusting. The loss outweighs the gain. Americans were extremely picky about their jobs. They would rather quit the job than suffer from it. Looking at the evasive gaze of his subordinates, the security guard here is really in trouble. Well, I'll leave it to you. After 10 minutes, if this pile of shit is still here, I'm going to find your manager. Hearing the security guard's words, Robbins Garcia said with a serious face. After speaking, he walked to Jiang Hai's side. Jiang Hai also gave him a thumbs up. Sometimes, having an elder at home is like having a treasure. Robbins Garcia should talk about this at this time. Hearing Robbins Garcia's words, the security guard here couldn't help but sigh. He gritted his teeth. He signed a captain-level contract with this exhibition. He was not a temporary worker. It would be difficult for him to give up this job. So, after hesitating for a while, he decided to do it. Then he borrowed a shovel from Jiang Hai and asked his subordinates to turn the cow dung cart over. Then he resisted the urge to vomit and shoveled the cow dung into the cart. When he was almost done, he covered his nose and went to the side to vomit. After that, he stubbornly pushed the cart of cow dung away. Although it took half an hour, the cow dung was finally dealt with, but the smell didn't dissipate so easily. Jiang Hai and the others deliberately pulled out a water pipe from the exhibition hall and washed the ground here. The smell was quite strong. It didn't disperse for a long time. There weren't many people in the beef exhibition hall, and most people would walk around when they came to Jiang Hai's exhibition hall. It was really too smelly. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai and the others sitting in the exhibition hall had ugly expressions. But what could they do? When he thought of Barton, Jiang Hai couldn't help but gnash his teeth in anger. He was sure that Barton did it on purpose. At this time, Barton had already returned from outside. There was a circle of gauze wrapped around his hand. Of course, it was just a disguise. He quietly walked into the exhibition hall. This exhibition hall was much bigger than the one Jiang Hai and the others were in. In the entire hall, there were almost 100 cows and more than a dozen different species. There were also a lot of people here. There were also 3 letters hanging outside the hall, SSR. Yes, this was one of the biggest livestock companies in Texas, SSR. It was also the company that had a conflict with Jiang Hai. After the man named Barton came in, he went straight to the lounge next door. In this lounge, he saw the man flirting with a female employee, so he coughed lightly and knocked on the door. Hearing that someone was here, the female employee immediately stood up and tidied up her clothes. She then winked at Barton and left. Barton's gaze followed the woman as she left. Fortunately, the man noticed him. Ahem, how's it going? Looking at Barton, the person inside pretended to look through the information and said to him, "It's done. That Jiang Hai is really looking for trouble. Not only did he offend all the cowboys in Texas, he also offended you. If he didn't only participate in livestock shows, I would have already dealt with him. If he participates in a cowboy competition, I can guarantee that he won't have a complete ending." When he heard the man's words, Barton had a flattering expression on his face. Then he walked forward while talking. When the man heard Barton's words, he couldn't help but grin. This man was called Roland Shalater. He was the one who had a conflict with Jiang Hai. Originally, he was still thinking about how to deal with Jiang Hai. After all, he hadn't been thrown out in a long time. But it was impossible to do it openly, because Jiang Hai wasn't a person who lacked money. If he did it openly, he would lose face. So he could only play dirty. Just as he was thinking about how to deal with Jiang Hai, he suddenly heard that Jiang Hai had offended all the cowboys in Texas. In fact, in Texas, if you offend a white cowboy, it was the same as offending all the cowboys in Texas. After all, the number of people of color was still too small, let alone a cowboy. And this morning, he also heard that these cowboys wanted to deal with Jiang Hai. He had to admit that these cowboys were too simple-minded. They thought about it for 2 days, and the only way they came up with was to block the exhibition hall. They just directly pulled some people out and blocked Jiang Hai's exhibition hall. It was like some gangsters in China asking for protection. They didn't beat you or scold you. They just sat at the door and didn't let others in. In their opinion, if they don't let the judges in, then Jiang Hai's bullsh**T won't get any points. Naturally, he won't get any awards, no matter how good his *T was. However, when Roland Shell-Eyed heard the news, he couldn't help but smile. These guys' brains were filled with muscles. In such a situation, wouldn't Zhang Hai inform the organizers? For the sake of their reputation, the organizers definitely wouldn't let these cowboys do that. They would just send security guards to drive these people away. At that time, if there was any conflict with the Americans' mentality, it was very likely that they would help build momentum for Zhang Hai's exhibition hall. If they wanted to ruin Zhang Hai's exhibition hall, they had to think of a special way. They had to make people hate his exhibition hall from the bottom of their hearts. They wouldn't be willing to go near it and spread rumors. The time was too short, and Zhang Hai was a foreigner, so the effect wouldn't be good. Then they had to be more direct and make people unable to go in. That's why this morning's scene happened. This Barton was a Texas cowboy, and also a member of his company. What he did today was taught by Roland Shell-Eyed. He had to admit that this guy had some talent in acting. Zhang Hai hated him so much that his teeth itched. "Boss, we finished Zhang Hai today. What are we going to do tomorrow? Do we still have to get cow dung?" Seeing that Roland Shell-Eyed was very satisfied with his actions this time, Barton couldn't help but laugh. At the same time, he rubbed his hands and said to Roland Shell-Eyed with a serious face, "They wouldn't just take revenge once. Tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, until Zhang Hai got out of here, they would disgust him. Tomorrow, it's still cow dung, but we'll add more ingredients in it." Roland Shell-Eyed couldn't help but laugh when he thought of Zhang Hai's expression when he saw the truck full of cow dung. The more exasperated Zhang Hai was, the happier he was. How's today? Soon, the sun set in the west, and the exhibition gradually came to an end. After the tourists left first, the beef cattle and cowboys also returned to their places. After Zhang Hai's beef cattle rushed back to the nest, Robbins Garcia took the first shift. Burkdollar came again in the second half of the night. After dawn, Zhang Hai and the others came again to take the cattle to the exhibition hall. After settling the cattle, Zhang Hai also returned to the hotel. As soon as he came back, he saw that Cheryl Lee was waiting for him in the room. Seeing that Zhang Hai was a little tired, Cheryl Lee came over and asked him, "It's a little troublesome. Why is it only you? Where's Prowalton?" With a chuckle, Zhang Hai asked Cheryl Lee, "Prow will come back a little later tonight. The staff of Sam's Club came over. She wants to invite them to dinner tonight. Connerson Peters is with her." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee also explained with a smile, She's not here. I thought I could come back and ask her for her opinion." After throwing his coat on the sofa, Zhang Hai lay on the bed and looked at the ceiling. Zhang Hai felt that this matter might not be over. Chapter 691. What's wrong? Can you tell me about it? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but raise her head with some doubts and said to Zhang Hai. Looking at her appearance, Zhang Hai thought for a moment, then shook his head and said, "Actually, it's nothing. Didn't I offend the cowboys here a while ago? Originally, I had been guarding against them, so I asked Belle and the others to be careful. As a result, I was still tricked by them today." Hearing Cheryl Lee's words, Zhang Hai sat up and said slowly. Hearing that Zhang Hai was tricked, Cheryl Lee immediately came over and looked at Zhang Hai with some concern. It's nothing. I was just disgusted by them." Looking at her eyes, Zhang Hai smiled and patted her hand. No matter how lawless those people were, they didn't dare to directly find trouble with Zhang Hai. But today's behavior was really too disgusting. Then Zhang Hai told Cheryl Lee about what happened today. After hearing Zhang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee was stunned. They can be so shameless? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but say with some surprise, "Yeah, it's quite shameless."
She nodded.
Even a shameless person like Zhang Hai said these people were boring. How shameless are these people? It really made Zhang Hai seem to be angered by both humans and gods. This matter is really not easy to deal with. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but rub her head and say, "These people can't be beaten, and scolding them won't relieve her anger. Moreover, they threw cow dung today. Zhang Hai doesn't believe that they will stop tomorrow. Thinking of this, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but feel a little numb because she didn't know what to do. The two of them sat on the big bed of the hotel, staring at each other, but they really couldn't think of any solution. My name is MT, Ironwall Body. At this moment, Jong Hai's cell phone rang. Looking at the phone, Jong Hai picked it up. The person who called is none other than AI Xiaoxi. They call each other every night, and it's time now. Hello, Jong Hai, have you eaten? A crisp voice came from the other side of the phone, followed by others' greetings. Not yet. Listening to AI Xiaoxi's words, Jong Hai also smiled. Listening to their voices, Jong Hai seemed to even lighten up. It's so late, and you haven't eaten yet? Are you very busy? Listening to Jong Hai's words, Feng Yunshun on the other side suddenly interjected. It's okay that I'm busy, but there are some things that are bothering me. Taking a deep breath, Jong Hai said helplessly. He wasn't the type to only report good news. He would report good news and bad news. He was so annoyed today that he couldn't think of a solution by himself. Rather than that, he might as well talk to AI Xiaoxi and the others. Even if he couldn't think of a solution, he could treat it as a way to reduce his stress. Without AI Xiaoxi and the others asking, Jong Hai talked about today's matter. After hearing Jong Hai's words, the other side couldn't help but be quiet. How is it? It's very troublesome. Hearing the other side quiet down, Jong Hai couldn't help but say with a headache, Is it very troublesome? It's okay. But at this moment, AI Xiaoxi suddenly said. Hearing what she said, Jong Hai couldn't help but be stunned. Is it very simple? How do we break this situation? Listening to AI Xiaoxi's voice on the phone, Jong Hai said with some eagerness. Actually, this matter is very simple. In my hometown, there are also such people, but they are not cowboys, they are hoodlums. But from what you said, they are almost the same as the cowboys there. These people eat, drink, have sex, gamble, and smoke every day. Many of them are addicted to flour and the like, squandering their family fortune, their bodies are ruined, and they are sick. But they still need money to do these things, so they will blackmail some rich people and throw dead mice, dead cats, and the like into the yard of these rich people. You can't hit them, but with their physical condition, one punch is enough to make them lie in bed for half a year, and then you have to take care of them for half a year. Listening to AI Xiaoxi's words, Jong Hai frowned. If such a person was by his side, he really wanted to beat him to death. But if he dies with such a person, it's really not worth it. It's similar to the current situation, but it's not so bad. What's the solution? Listening to AI Xiaoxi's words, Jong Hai couldn't help but ask with some doubts. There are two ways to solve this. One is to directly find the local police. If you have a good relationship with them, find the police to arrest them. After you teach them a lesson inside, they won't come to provoke you when they come out. Of course, the premise is that you can't provoke them. The second is to confront them head-on. Didn't he pour cow dung on you here? Then you can dump cow dung on them too. Listening to AI Xiaoxi's words, Jong Hai couldn't help but be stunned. Yes, if they dump cow dung on me, then I can dump cow dung on them too, giving them a taste of their own medicine. But the prerequisite is that you have to know who the other party is. If it's really like what you said, your opponent is just a small cowboy. In fact, I think it's better to find someone to beat them up. If you're still angry, you can try Croton. At this time, Chi Jie's voice came from the phone, but there was a trace of strangeness in her words. Croton. Listening to Chi Jie's words, Jong Hai was a little confused. Isn't this game for diarrhea? What do I do with this thing? You have to find those people who hurt you, and then you have to find a way to give them some Croton. Don't worry, this thing can't be detected in the United States. The medical system in the United States is very poor. They can't even detect food poisoning. At most, they can only prescribe some medicine to stop diarrhea, but you can make them feel good. Listening to Chi Jie's words, Jong Hai couldn't help but touch his chin. This is a good idea. But the most important thing now is that you have to know who is targeting you. This is also very important. Feeling that Jong Hai listened, Chi Jie also said seriously on the phone. It was impossible to directly face the entire state. It was important to find the person who stood out. Okay, I got it. After Chi Jie and others studied it, Jong Hai also had a rough idea. He has never been a very obedient person. He will make trouble for these people no matter how others make trouble for him. He has never been a kind person. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai did not stay at home. Instead, he went downstairs and drove to the cowshed. Less than half an hour after he left, Prawalton also came back. When she saw that Jiang Hai was not in the hotel, she was stunned, and after Cheryl Lee told her about Jiang Hai today, she couldn't help but laugh. Then Prawalton made a phone call, and a man with a slightly anxious tone was on the other side of the phone. "Miss Walton, I don't know if Mr. Jiang would like to meet and talk about the cooperation?" Before Prawalton could speak, the person on the other side of the phone said seriously. It could be heard that his words were extremely anxious. "Jiang Hai doesn't know about the cooperation because he is out, but I can take you directly to the exhibition hall tomorrow to see him. You can also see his cow. What do you think, Mr. Sean?" Listening to the anxious voice on the other side of the phone, Prawalton said with a smile, "Of course, no problem." Hearing Prawalton's words, the man named Sean on the other side of the phone agreed. "It's solved." After hanging up the phone, Prawalton looked at the puzzled Cheryl Lee and said with a smile. Cheryl Lee blinked. In fact, to be honest, she didn't understand how it was solved, but she believed in Prawalton. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know that Walton had helped him solve this seemingly troublesome matter. He was still studying his own plan. Croton and the like, he could just buy it now. Jiang Hai knew that there was a sea merchant supermarket nearby. If there was a sea merchant supermarket, it meant that there was a Chinese settlement. If he wanted to buy some croton there, it wouldn't be a very troublesome thing. As long as he didn't kill anyone, it would be a small matter. If he wanted to find out who was dealing with him, the person named Barton was very important. But if he wanted to find out where he was, he would have to use other people. After all, he was too eye-catching. Robbins Garcia was also at the scene of the conflict that day, so it was inconvenient for him to show up. Burke Dollar was naturally more boring and not suitable for inquiring about things. Belle Lester was a very good candidate. Young, frivolous, and because he had lived in the Triangle State, his spoken English was very good. He was indeed the best candidate to find someone. After arriving at the cowshed, Jiang Hai talked to Belle Lester. Belle Lester immediately left the cowshed. After changing his clothes, he inquired about a Texas cowboy bar and sneaked in. In Texas, cowboys were one of the symbols here. Naturally, the cowboy bar here was also quite popular. Of course, he couldn't go in wrong because in the United States, sometimes cowboys also represented another culture. In the past, the Chinese director Ang Lee once made a movie that caused a sensation in Hollywood. It was called Brokeback Mountain. The protagonists in the movie were two cowboys, and then they cough. In the words of a song, the general idea was gay friends in the wind and rain. But in the United States, cowboy bars and sailor bars were sometimes bars that engaged in that kind of special relationship. Bell was very straight, straighter than steel, so he must go to a normal bar. Fortunately, he was also a cowboy, so he still knew how to distinguish. After finding the bar, he paid the entrance fee. Of course, it was paid by Jiang Hai. He walked into the bar. He sat down at the bar and ordered a glass of expensive wine. Then, he listened to the music as he drank. As soon as he walked in, he attracted a lot of attention. Of course, most of them were women. Bell was quite eye-catching in general. He was fair and clean. Because he had a good figure, he especially liked to wear a small shirt that could show off his muscles unless it was winter. There was a Special Forces identity tag hanging around his neck. Years of military life made him like to keep a very unique buzz cut. When he stayed in places like bars and nightclubs, it was indeed quite attractive. A wild, handsome white guy who used to be a soldier was enough to make those women go crazy. Looking at those women who were throwing flirtatious glances at him, if it was a normal day, Bell would have used his flirting skills. But today, he had business to do. After drinking a glass of wine, he ordered another one and then looked at the bartender. "Hey man, your music here is really good," Bell said while shaking his head slowly. "Of course, our music, wine, and beautiful women here are the best in San Antonio." Hearing Bell's praise, the bartender here also said with excitement. At the same time, his eyes were also looking at a beautiful woman on the dance floor in the distance. Hearing his words, Belle also glanced back. He remembered that this beautiful woman just gestured to him, so he chuckled. This guy is about to take the bait. Music and wine, I've tasted it. Beautiful woman, I'm going to try it. Taking out a Franklin and stuffing it into the jar next to him, Belle finished speaking and walked into the crowd. Not long after, he returned to the bar with a beautiful woman in each arm, then winked at the bartender, but the bartender's face was a little ugly because one of the beautiful women in Belle's arms at this time was his goddess. Seeing his gaze, Belle was more sure that he did the right thing. Hey, beautiful women, I saw a scene when I was at the exhibition today. It was so interesting. A guy hurt his hand and then threw cow dung everywhere. Cow dung, haha. After a few simple greetings and after ordering wine, Belle laughed and told what happened today as a joke to the two girls, and the girls were very happy to hear it. They didn't really come to listen to jokes. Naturally, they will like to listen to whatever Belle says. They only care about Belle and the Franklin in his pocket. But this scene, in the eyes of the bartender opposite, was burning with jealousy. Hurt his hand? Hey, bro, you probably don't know the details. Just now, he endured for a long time and didn't interrupt. Now that he finally had a chance to speak, the bartender said slowly, while wiping the wine glass, "Oh, is there any secret in this?" Hearing the bartender's words, Belle's eyes narrowed, and he pretended not to care. Of course, the person who turned the car over is called Willie Barton. He is right there. Do you think he hurt his hand? When the bartender heard Belle's words, he smiled proudly and pointed to the guy who was dancing hard on the dance floor. Chapter 692. Following the bartender's gaze, Belle glanced at the crowd. Sure enough, he saw the guy dancing on the dance floor. Although the lights were a bit dim, Belle recognized him at a glance. It was Barton. He was still wearing his daytime clothes and had a piece of gauze wrapped around his arm. It was this guy who looked like an idiot when he was dancing, but he caused a lot of trouble for Jiang Hai. After knowing his goal, Belle smiled. He remembered Jiang Hai's words. First, don't expose yourself so as not to alert the enemy. Second, find out who was behind this guy. Was it someone who was targeting Jiang Hai, or was it the Texas Cowboys? These 2 points might be troublesome for others, but for Belle, it was a piece of cake. After confirming the identity of the person, Belle deliberately placed a wine glass in front of him. Then, he placed the watch he bought for $50,000 against the glass. Seeing his actions, the two girls beside him were surprised. They clearly saw that this watch was from Jordan's Legacy series. This watch was sold for $520,000 in China, but it wasn't that expensive in the United States. It was only $50,000, but it was still $50,000. People here might not even make $50,000 in a year. Looking at the watch, they were a bit shocked. The two girls were shocked at the wealth of this man who looked good, and the bartender was shocked at how bold this guy was. He actually dared to take off the watch. Right now, he was only thinking maliciously if Barton forgot to take it with him. If he didn't, then he would have to pick it up. But unfortunately, Belle put the watch here mainly to use the reflection of the dial to observe Barton's movements. Watches like this don't reflect light because they were afraid of dazzling the eyes. Well, it could also be for other reasons. But Belle knew how to make it reflect light. He just needed to borrow a wine glass. So, he was multitasking. While chatting with the two girls, he was also observing Barton. After about half an hour, the two girls were almost leaning on him. It was as if they were saying, "Hurry up and take me away, I can't hold it anymore." But Belle was still calm. Finally, Barton finished his dance. Perhaps he was a little tired, so he said goodbye to his partner and walked to the bathroom in the distance. Seeing him move, Belle also moved. Under the bartender's disappointed gaze, she picked up the watch and put it on her wrist. "I'm going to the bathroom, then we'll leave, okay?" Looking at the two intoxicated girls, Belle said with a smile, "Of course." Facing Belle's invitation, the two girls weren't shy or embarrassed. Instead, they said this with a smile. They had been waiting for Belle to say this, and now that Belle finally said it, they naturally wouldn't oppose it. After Belle finished talking to them, he chuckled and followed Barton to the bathroom. The bathroom here is not like the bathrooms in the nightclubs. There are often people having sex in there, so even outside the men's bathroom there are a lot of people lining up. This cowboy bar is not so messy, so there are no people outside the men's bathroom. After Belle watched Willie Barton walk in, he followed him in. At the same time, he picked up a plastic bag from the trash can next to him. After walking into the bathroom, Belle glanced at the urinal area and saw that only Willie Barton was there. Belle walked over and directly put the plastic bag on his head without saying a word. Willie Barton felt that his vision turned black and breathing became difficult in an instant. Willie Barton couldn't help but struggle immediately, but unfortunately, Belle was much more ruthless than him. Seeing him struggling, Belle punched him directly in the stomach. In an instant, the man couldn't struggle anymore, but the early struggle still had some effect. At least the plastic bag was broken, so he could breathe normally. Then Belle went up and kicked him without saying a word. After a minute, Barton recovered. Sorry, brother, who are you? Stop hitting, what's going on? Damn it, who the hell is it? Feeling Belle's punches and kicks, Willie Barton didn't do anything other than holding his head, and it was impossible for him to do anything else. Willie's punch just now was enough to make him lose his fighting power. How could he resist? Kid, is your name Willie Barton? Don't deny it, I've been watching you all night. Do you remember who the woman you danced with today? It doesn't matter if I tell you. That's my wife. I saw you touch her body no less than 30 times. Hee, I think you don't want your hand anymore. Belle grabbed Willie Barton's collar and said angrily. However, his words were now in a Texas accent, mixed with a hint of Mexican. I really don't know. Really, brother, let me go. I will never appear in front of him again. She is a typical white woman, wearing a purple-red deep V-neck shirt. She does look a little old, about 30 years old. She does look like a married woman, but he didn't expect that the husband of this married woman would also come. Thinking of this, Willie Barton couldn't help but shout loudly. It's too late. Your hand is mine. Belle heard Willie Barton's words and laughed sinisterly. No. I'm from SSR Company, brother. We're all Texans. Let's talk things over. Hearing that Belle was going to take his hand, Willie Barton couldn't help but start randomly mentioning people. Unfortunately, he only knew one of the higher-ups. SSR Company. After hearing Willie Barton's words, Belle's heart skipped a beat, but he still pretended to be confused and fearful. As a native of Texas, there was no way he didn't know about SSR. It was a giant company. Of course, that was only for the average cowboy. Knowing that Willie Barton was a native of Texas would be a little intimidated. Yes, I'm from SSR Company. I just got in touch with their CEO's son, Roland Shalide. Today I did something big for them. Maybe it was out of fear, or maybe it was to show off his relationship with Roland Shalide. Willie Green immediately said, Bastard, I must be a crazy Texan. Remember, you haven't seen me before, or I'll take you to hell with me, you bastard. Pretending to be crazy and scared, Belle shouted loudly in Willie Barton's ear and finally kicked his stomach before leaving the bathroom. But as soon as he left, he changed into a different appearance. He returned to the bar with a smile, and under the envious gaze of the bartender, he left the bar with the two blondes in his arms and went to a small hotel nearby to get a room. As for what he was going to do, it was needless to say. After being satisfied, Belle threw down $200, then went downstairs and drove back to the cowshed. As for Willie Barton, it took him 2 minutes to rush out of the bathroom like a madman, but unfortunately, he was destined to come up empty-handed. With a swollen face, he found the woman just now, but while he was in the bathroom, the woman had already thrown herself into the arms of another man. Willie Barton knew this man. He was a veteran cowboy in the area, and he couldn't afford to offend him. In the end, he could only bitterly give up and pretend that he stepped on someone's asterisk when he went out today. After paying for tonight's drinks, he went to the nearby red light district with a face full of dissatisfaction. He needed to vent his anger. On the other side, after Belle returned to the cowshed, he told the news to Zhang Hai, who was guarding there. So, it's SSR Company behind this. How should we deal with these guys? Rubbing his chin, Zhang Hai began to think. Tomorrow, let's get a truck full of cow dung and dump it in front of their company. What do you think? Belle whispered to Zhang Hai when he saw him thinking. Hearing this, Zhang Hai hesitated for a moment and decided to dump cow dung. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But the problem was this was too childish. Zhang Hai didn't want to do this. If he was going to do it, he had to do it even more ruthlessly. And what was more ruthless than cow dung? Human dung? But it would be very disgusting to do this, and Zhang Hai didn't want to disgust himself. Maybe the miraculous Chinese medicine of Hua Xia will come in handy. Zhang Hai thought for a moment and said with a smirk. Zhang Hai patted Belle, indicating that he should go back to sleep first. Zhang Hai, on the other hand, was thinking about what to do tomorrow. The night passed quickly. Soon it was dawn. Robbins Garcia and Burke had also arrived. Belle had rested for the night and was in good spirits. The three cowboys cooperated with the cart and pulled the three cows to their own exhibition hall, ready to start the show. Zhang Hai drove his car and left first. He went to San Antonio's Chinatown. In the United States, as long as it was a big city, there would be a Chinatown. It was just a matter of size. As mentioned earlier, people of color in Texas didn't live very well, so the Chinatown here wasn't very big. However, this was the seventh largest city in the United States after all. In terms of cities alone, there were still many people here. There was also a sea merchant supermarket here. Zhang Hai went to the supermarket first and explained the situation to the person. Of course, he had called Zhang Dihai before this, and the old man also clearly explained Zhang Hai's situation to this person. So when Zhang Hai came, the person in the supermarket took Zhang Hai to the nearby Chinese medicine hall. There, Zhang Hai bought croton with the name of the sea market, but it was not the normal grain but croton powder. This kind of medicine was originally used to treat illnesses in traditional Chinese medicine, just like the original marijuana. It was medicine, not poison. Croton was used to treat chest and abdominal pain, lack of bowel movement, diarrhea, dysentery, and other diseases, but Zhang Hai was using it to harm people. After confirming that the hospital in the United States wouldn't be able to detect this thing, Zhang Hai left the place. After returning to the exhibition hall, Zhang Hai and Belle looked at each other. They were going to take revenge today. The exhibition hall was left to Robbins Garcia and Burke so they could handle everything. Zhang Hai and Belle went to the SSR exhibition hall. Just as they were about to head to the SSR exhibition hall, Roland Shalater called Willie Barton over. What happened to you? Looking at the bruised and swollen face of Willie Barton, Roland Salad was stunned for a moment, then asked him. When I came home last night, the lights were too dark, so I fell. Boss, if you have something to say, just say it. Hearing Roland Shalade's words, Willie Green had an awkward smile on his face. Indeed, this matter was too embarrassing for him. Forget it, I don't care how you got this injury. Is today's cow dung ready? Looking at Willie Barton in front of him, Roland Shalide said with a serious face. It seems that he is addicted to tricking Zhang Hai. Don't worry, I added something today. Hearing Roland Shalide's words, Willie Barton also said with a serious smile on his face. That's good, then let's do it. Looking at Willie Barton's smile, Roland Shalide was sure that this guy wouldn't let him down. But just as the two were about to discuss again, suddenly there was a commotion in front of the exhibition hall. Roland Shalide heard the noise in front of him and walked out of the lounge. As a result, he saw Zhang Hai walking inside at a glance. As soon as he saw Zhang Hai coming in, his right eyelid couldn't help but twitch. He felt that Zhang Hai seemed to be here to denounce him, so he immediately winked at Willie Barton, and he immediately hid in the lounge next to him. Sir, you can't force your way in. At this time, the staff in front were still trying hard to stop Zhang Hai, but how could they stop Zhang Hai's strength? He just pushed the crowd aside and walked inside, saying, "Isn't this the exhibition hall? I'm here to learn. Why are you stopping me?" Listening to Zhang Hai's words, the people here couldn't say anything. Don't stop him. Go do what you need to do. At this moment, Roland Shalide came up from behind after tidying up his suit. He looked at Zhang Hai in front of him, raised his head proudly, and said to Zhang Hai. Seeing the main character come out, Zhang Hai also quietly made a gesture behind his back. The show is about to start. Chapter 693. Nothing. I just came to see the strength of one of the top livestock companies in Texas. This exhibition hall is indeed much bigger than mine. Hearing Roland Salad's words, Zhang Hai also said seriously, "Oh, it is indeed much bigger than yours. After all, we are a company here." "Oh, sorry, I heard that you are also a company. Tinglong Company?" "Haha, it's really a company." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Roland Salad also said with a smile. He felt that when his voice fell, Zhang Hai's face became a little ugly. "Don't be complacent. You are the one who poured cow dung in front of my exhibition hall yesterday." Narrowing his eyes, Zhang Hai looked at Roland Salad and said seriously. Hearing what Zhang Hai said, Roland Salad's eyes also narrowed, but he did not retreat. "Oh, I don't understand what you're talking about. Although there are some contradictions between us, I am still a businessman after all. A businessman should focus on making money, right? I don't understand what I can get by pouring cow dung in front of your exhibition hall. You are not really naive to think that those cows in your exhibition hall can get a ranking." Gently touching the ring on his finger, Roland Salad said with a smile, "You're just pretending to be confused. Willie Barton." Hearing him directly deny his words, Zhang Hai also took a step forward. "Again, I don't know what you are talking about." Shrugging, Roland Salad would not admit it, but his expression was clearly saying, "Yes, I did it."
What can you do about it?
"You are pretending to be ignorant." Looking at Roland's expression, Zhang Hai didn't say anything. He instantly stretched out his hands and lifted Roland Salad up. As soon as he lifted Roland Salad, almost everyone gathered around him. However, Roland Salad stretched out his hand and stopped these people in midair.
Don't come over.
Turn on your phone and start recording. At the same time, inform the security guard. I want to see if he has the guts to beat me. Listening to Roland Salad's words, the people here hesitated for a moment, but they still picked up their phones and started recording. But while these people were watching and taking photos, no one noticed that Belle had pretended to be a tourist and sneaked into the exhibition hall. At the same time, using the crowd as cover, he came to the bucket water fountain here in the blind spot of the camera. He gently pulled the bucket off the water fountain, then took a bag of brown powder and poured it into the water. The powder melted after it was poured into the water. Then he gently put the bucket of water on the water fountain again and slowly prepared to leave from the back door. But halfway through, he found Willie Barton's body passing by the back door. Seeing this scene, Belle followed with a smirk on his face. Zhang Hai, who was watching Belle leave, also laughed in his heart. Now, what he had to do was to find a group of people to come down. Just as he was about to wait for the security guards to come down, suddenly, the phone in his pocket rang. So, he pretended to be angry and let go of Roland Salad. He picked up the phone and glanced at it. It turned out to be a call from Walton. After thinking for a moment, Zhang Hai glared at him, then took the phone and walked out of the hall. "Okay, let's disperse." Looking at Zhang Hai's helpless expression, Roland Salad couldn't help but smile proudly. Even if Zhang Hai guessed that he was the one who did it, what could he do? He still had to obediently let go of him. Thinking of this, Roland Salad couldn't help but raise his head proudly, but the scene just now was still very scary. He felt that he was almost beaten up. He was nervous before, so he didn't notice anything. Now that he was not nervous, he felt that his throat was a little tight and he was a little thirsty. He glanced at the water dispenser in the distance, walked over, picked up a disposable paper cup, and drank it in one gulp. "Hello, calling me at this time. What's the matter?" On the other side, Zhang Hai, who walked out of the exhibition hall, also picked up the phone and asked Walton on the other side of the phone. This phone call was indeed a good way to get out of the embarrassing situation, but Zhang Hai was indeed a little curious. "It's nothing, I just went to your exhibition hall and found that you weren't there, so I called to ask about it. There's one more thing, a local wants to discuss a business with you. If it's convenient for you, you can come back." Listening to Zhang Hai's voice on the other side of the phone, Walton followed him and spoke. Hearing that there was something going on in the exhibition hall, Zhang Hai also glanced at the SSR exhibition hall. He didn't know what would happen later. With a smile on his face, Zhang Hai walked towards his exhibition hall. while he was walking towards his exhibition hall. On the other side, Belle was quietly following Willie Barton. He wanted to see what this guy wanted to do. Willie Barton did not know that Belle was following him. Although he was very careful, he was not a professional. He walked and stopped all the way until he reached the cowshed where the cows used to be. It was where the cows stayed at night. "Hey, Willie, you're here." As soon as Willie Barton walked to the cowshed, a voice came from inside. If Zhang Hai or Robbins Garcia were here, they would definitely recognize that voice. It was the voice of the cowboy who had a conflict with them. It seems that these people have already joined forces. Thinking about it, Zhang Hai was the enemy of all Texas cowboys. "Is the thing ready?" After hearing this man's words, Willie Barton also said eagerly. After hearing his words, the cowboy on the other side also replied immediately. "Yes, it's not that good. Let's try it. It's all ready. This is the cow dung from the past few days, and it's been seasoned. A lot of our stuff is mixed in, hee. Hearing Willie Barton's words, the cowboy said disgustedly, but he didn't feel anything wrong at all. "This time, let's teach those foreigners a lesson. How dare they look down on us? Ha cough, this smell is too strong. I'll push it out first." Hearing the cowboy's words, Willie Barton couldn't help but speak a little louder. But just as he spoke a little louder, he inhaled the smell and couldn't help but retch. It was really too smelly. Willie Barton took out a mask and put it on his face. Then, he pushed the cart out of the room. Looking at his figure, Belle couldn't help but sneer. This time, they will know what it means to reap what they sow. Thinking of this, Belle continued to follow him to the exhibition hall. At this time, Zhang Hai had returned to his exhibition hall. Because there was no smell, there were still some people in the exhibition hall at this time. Of course, the most important group of people was Pra Walton and her team. In addition, there were two men in front of her, an old man who looked about 60 years old and a middle-aged man who was about 40 years old. They were talking to Pra Walton at this time. After seeing Zhang Hai walk in, Pra Walton couldn't help but smile and waved at Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai couldn't help but walk in when he saw them. The researchers over there also took the initiative to walk over when they saw Zhang Hai. "Mr. Zhang Hai, I have to admit that the cattle you raised are still perfect, even better than last year. You will definitely get a good result in this exhibition." Among them, the oldest researcher had been full of praise ever since he saw the cow. This was the most beautiful Angus cow he had ever seen. It was almost as if he had seen it in textbooks. It had perfect fur, perfect bone structure, perfect muscles, and most importantly, it had a trace of spirituality. This kind of cow was really amazing. "I hope so too." Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also smiled, then said to him, then came to Pra Walton's side. He was really curious. Why did Pra Walton call him over? "Hey Zhang, your cattle here are still so good, haha." Seeing Zhang Hai coming over, Pra Walton said with a smile, but she couldn't help but laugh because she accompanied Zhang Hai to pick these cattle. "Well, what's the matter?" Looking at Pra Walton in front of him, Zhang Hai signaled with his eyes that there are other people here. Sure enough, under Zhang Hai's gaze, Pra Walton also withdrew her gaze and returned to her iceberg state. "Come, let me introduce you. This is Luke Sean, one of the top ranchers in Texas. His nature is not much different from yours. He is also a homeowner. In addition, he is also a businessman and has shares in many companies such as Microsoft, Google. This is his son, Anthony Sean. This is Zhang Hai. If you have anything to say, you can talk to him directly." After a brief introduction, Pra Walton let Zhang Hai and the others talk by themselves. It is inconvenient for her to intervene in some things. "Hello, Mr. Zhang Hai. I've heard a lot about you." After hearing Pra Walton's introduction, Luke Sean shook hands with Zhang Hai. Then his son, Anthony Sean, also shook hands with Zhang Hai. When shaking hands, Zhang Hai felt very strange. What are these people doing? With all due respect, we don't seem to be very familiar with each other, so let's get straight to the point. May I know why you're looking for me? After hesitating for a while, Zhang Hai decided to say it directly. Otherwise, he would be a little depressed. Well, yes, this time we came to find Mr. Zhang Hai. It is indeed a little abrupt. Let me explain our purpose. We're looking for Mr. Jiang Hai mainly to buy fodder from Mr. Jiang Hai. Looking at Jiang Hai, Luke-shan smiled and said to Jiang Hai. After hearing his words, Jiang Hai had some doubts. Buy fodder? I would like to ask, what is this for? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai felt a little strange. At present, only Du Feynman knew that he was selling fodder. How did he know? This made Jiang Hai somewhat puzzled. Coincidentally, we are one of the companies, so I know a little about your feed. The nutrition in your feed is really beyond our expectations. After cows eat your feed, as long as they are raised carefully, they can grow marbled beef. We are very interested in this, so we came here to buy your feed. I don't know if you're interested in this business. Looking at Jiang Hai, Luke-shan went straight to the point and asked Jiang Hai directly. After hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment, then inwardly scolded Du Feynman, this idiot. Was he crazy? Didn't he know how to make a fortune in silence? Didn't he know to use his own royal institution to do the testing? Jiang Hai also posted it all over the world. It was impossible for Jiang Hai not to attract other people's attention. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh and shake his head. In a while, he would definitely make a call and ask this guy if his brain was damaged. In principle, I agree to sell the fodder. However, the price and quantity may be a little troublesome. After all, I also need to raise cattle in my manor. I have to ensure that my cattle are full before I can sell some. In addition, the quantity requested by Dubai is quite large, so it is difficult for me to directly agree here. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai decided to call Du Feynman first to ask about the situation. If Du Feynman was really an idiot, then Jiang Hai could just not sell his feed in the future. At the same time, if he wanted to sell, he would have to discuss with Robbins Garcia and the others how much of the cattle and feed in the manor could be left. This is what we should do. We came here today to offer the intention of cooperation. I don't know when you can give us a reply. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't say no and only said that he wanted to study it, Luke-shan didn't know that there was a chance. After doing business for so many years, he could see that Jiang Hai would sell his feed to anyone. What he said just now was also very particular. Although he didn't say anything bad about Dubai's royal family, it also faintly revealed that Dubai's royal family didn't seem to believe Jiang Hai. He was also bearing a line between Jiang Hai and Du Feynman. If something really happened, then this line would be exposed. If nothing happened, then he wouldn't have any problems. These old guys who had lived for a long time weren't easy to deal with. Chapter 694. If there are no accidents, tomorrow will be fine. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai said to Luke-shan. He could actually do it this afternoon, but there was no need to rush. It was as if he cared about this deal, but in fact, Jiang Hai didn't care much about this. If that's the case, it's really great, then I'll come back tomorrow. Hearing that Jiang Hai gave a satisfactory answer, Luke-shan couldn't help but smile and say, then after a few polite words with Jiang Hai, the three shook hands and parted ways. When the two walked out of Jiang Hai's exhibition hall, Anthony Shan, who had hardly spoken, looked at his father. Father, I don't understand. Why don't we study the composition of his grass and make it ourselves, or buy his ranch directly? Buying grass like this, when will it end? And the most important thing is that the lifeline is still in his hands. Looking at Luke-shan, Anthony Shan couldn't help but say with some doubts. To be honest, their family's power in Texas is almost the same as Jiang Hai's in Winthrop. They're basically like local tyrants. They can get whatever they want. This is the first time they have taken the initiative to seek cooperation. You don't understand. This Jiang Hai is very useful. Hearing his son's words, Luke-shan smiled and said mysteriously, I don't quite understand. Hearing Luke-shan's words, Anthony Shan couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. Child, you're still too young. This Jiang Hai can now sell grass so fearlessly, which means that he is absolutely sure that we can't copy the grass. Now we are seeking cooperation, first to get closer to him and second to guard against the Middle East. You can't be naive to think that after the royal family of Dubai raised good beef, they will eat all of it themselves. That is more than 1 million cattle, and their target of dumping, if there is no accident, must be Europe and the United States. The high-end beef market in Asia has been occupied by Japan. When the time comes, I ask you, who will be the biggest hit? Looking at his son, Luke Sean also said with a smile, Montana and us. After hesitating for a moment, Anthony Sean's eyes lit up. After all, he was not a fool, and he was already in his 40s. He had been in the business world for more than 20 years. He could see very clearly. With just a little bit, he would understand. Oh, if we cooperate with Shanghai, we can keep our own market share and study the market outside. It's a win-win situation. The most important thing is that we can't figure out the secret of Shanghai's fodder now, but it doesn't mean that we can't do it in the future. By then, hearing this, Anthony Sean had completely figured it out. According to the Huaxia people, this is called the pavilion closest to the water enjoys the moonlight first. Hearing what his father said, Anthony Sean also said with a smile. At this time, Shanghai didn't know about the wishful thinking of the father and son duo. In fact, even if he knew, he would probably just laugh disdainfully. They wanted to study the secrets of the grass? They are really blind. If they can figure it out, he can give it to them. But the problem is that there is only one Dragon Ball in this world, and that thing is in Shanghai's body. Unless they cut Shanghai into pieces and study it, it is absolutely impossible. Moreover, with Shanghai's current net worth of billions of dollars, the relationship between Shanghai and the Walmart Group, the relationship between Shanghai and the royal family of Dubai, and the relationship between Shanghai and Huaxia, unless Shanghai wants to die, no one dares to touch him, especially in terms of personal safety. As for cattle, fish, and grass, they can study it if they want. As long as they don't go against the state agencies, Shanghai doesn't care because he knows that they can't figure it out. And these people don't dare to go against him openly. After all, as they said, Shanghai still has the lifeline of their money. In the United States, everything is based on money. No one will go against money, including these people. I didn't intend to introduce this Luke Sean to you, but I heard that you have some trouble recently, so I specially brought them here today. In Texas, their power is still very good. As long as they say a word, those people won't dare to trouble you. After watching Shanghai and Luke Sean finish talking, Prawalton came over. No need. Do I need others to take revenge? Hearing Prawalton's words, Shanghai couldn't help but be stunned. He originally thought that Prawalton called them here to introduce him to business, but now it seems that she has a deeper meaning. But it's useless to say this now, because Shanghai has decided to take revenge himself. Take revenge yourself? How are you going to do it? Hearing Shanghai's words, Prawalton asked with a puzzled look. Hey, wait a minute. Seeing Prawalton's puzzled look, Shanghai wanted to say something, but at this moment his phone rang. He picked it up and saw that the person who called was none other than Belle. But at this time, Belle seemed to be in a hurry. He only told Shanghai to go to the entrance of the SSR exhibition hall and watch the show, preferably far away, and then hung up the phone. Shanghai knows that this guy will definitely not say things without a reason. Let's go, I'll take you to watch the show. Since Belle said that there was a show to watch, Shanghai didn't hold back. He smiled and pulled Prawalton away. Regarding Shanghai and Prawalton leaving the exhibition hall, whether it was Shanghai's people or the people from the Walmart Group, they were not surprised. Because they all knew that Shanghai and Prawalton had a close relationship. Forget about dragging them out. Even if they went to a hotel and booked a room, they would not be surprised. Where are we going? After Shanghai pulled her out of the exhibition hall, Prawalton asked in confusion. Follow me and you'll know. After talking to Prawalton, Shanghai quickly pulled her to the entrance of the SSR exhibition hall. It had been about half an hour since the last time he left, and in this half an hour, the effect of the drug had just taken effect. Ouch, what's going on? At this time, Roland Shullid was sitting in the lounge, waiting for Willie Barton's news. He suddenly felt a little pain in his intestines. As the saying goes, a stomachache is not an illness, it's just that he didn't poop properly. In addition, he was a little nervous now. At first he thought that it was because he was nervous, so he wanted to go to the toilet. But later, when he felt his stomach hurt more and more, He felt that he might really need to go to the toilet. How could he care so much? So when his stomach growled again, he stood up and walked out of his room to go to the bathroom. But when he arrived in front of the bathroom, he saw that the bathroom was full of people. Ouch, boss. Do you need to go to the bathroom too? Suddenly, an employee walked over while clutching his stomach. He looked at Roland Shalid and grinned. What's going on? Roland Shalid was a little confused when he saw the employee's reaction. I don't know, it seems like the food we ate this morning wasn't clean. All the employees have diarrhea. This is my 4th time. Ouch. Come out quickly. I can't hold it in anymore. When the employee heard Roland Shalid's words, he suddenly squeezed his butt and quickly walked to the bathroom door. He knocked on the door, but the person inside didn't even open it. Yes, Zhang Hai's attack was indiscriminate. The people who drank the bucket of water were mainly the employees of SSR. They prepared bottled water for the guests because these people weren't ordinary tourists. They were people who might buy their cows, so they naturally treated them well. The bottled water they drank was imported from Europe. The employees weren't allowed to drink the bottled water, so they drank the drugged bucket of water. Roland Shalid was actually quite lucky because he had been sitting in his office for more than half an hour. But the employees were different. They had to explain and promote to these people, so they wasted a lot of saliva. Naturally, they were thirsty. So they drank more, and the more they drank, the faster they reacted. There was now a long line in front of the bathroom. Looking at these people, Roland Shalid couldn't help but lick his lips. If this was in other countries, if a leader like him wanted to go to the toilet, even if the people inside didn't finish their business, some people would take the initiative to flatter him and give up their seats. However, this was the United States, a country that emphasized human rights. Therefore, no one would give up their seats for him. It was also somewhat embarrassing for him to fight for the bathroom with the employees. However, looking at these people who were having diarrhea, he felt that the idea that he could have held back for a while seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Now, he seemed to be unable to hold it in any longer. He looked around and decided to go to the bathroom in the exhibition hall next door. So, he tidied up his suit and walked out of the exhibition hall with a proud face. But at this time, Zhang Hai and Prawalton also came over. They immediately saw Roland Shalid, so they knew each other. He's the one who wants to mess with you? Prawalton pointed at Roland Shalid in surprise.
Hey, it's him.
Look at my revenge. Hearing Prawalton's words, Zhang Hai smiled, then wrinkled his nose and took a few steps back. His extraordinary sense of smell smelled something that shouldn't be smelled. Although Prawalton didn't smell anything, she also took a step back because she believed in Zhang Hai. At this moment, the sound of a trolley came from a distance, and on the trolley, there was a pile of stinky things, emitting a smell. When the pedestrians on the road smelled this smell, they subconsciously moved away, then looked at the cowboy who was pushing the trolley with a puzzled face. Looking at this cowboy, Zhang Hai grinned, because he knew that this cowboy was Belle, but Belle didn't wear his own set of clothes. Instead, he changed into Willie Barton's original clothes, a shabby cowboy suit, and the bandage on his right arm was exactly the same, but the low brim of his hat exposed his existence. As the trolley got closer and closer, Roland Shalid had just walked out of the exhibition hall when he smelled the stench. Seeing the trolley rushing towards him, he was scared out of his wits, and the trolley was directly pushed towards him. Oh my God! Roland Shalid, who had been focusing most of his energy on fighting against his intestines, screamed in fright when he saw the cart coming towards him. He wanted to run away, but as soon as he moved, he heard a long sound of a flute coming from the lower part of his body, followed by a cracking sound. He felt that his pants had become heavier without him realizing it. More importantly, after eating the croton seeds, the yellow liquid instantly flowed down his trousers. But before anyone could notice that he had been scared out of his wits, Roland Shalid heard a loud sound coming from the lower part of his body, followed by a cracking sound. He felt that his pants had become heavier. More importantly, after eating the croton seeds, the yellow liquid instantly flowed down his trousers. The trolley was already pushed over. Without saying a word, the pile of human, cow, and some unknown creatures, which could not be described because it was too disgusting, was poured directly on his body. Then Jiang Hai saw Belle pretend to be very panicked. After apologizing in a thick Texas accent, he quickly squeezed out of the crowd and disappeared, leaving Roland Shalide standing in the middle of a pile of feces. Roland Shalide was still pooping on the side. For a moment, the smell of himself and the smell of cow dung made everyone in the area run away. The nearby exhibition halls also closed their doors. It was as if Roland Salad was the only person left in the world. Of course, there were also a lot of surveillance cameras. "Willie Barton, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you." Ugh. Ah. Looking at the pile of excrement on his body, face, and even the corners of his mouth, he shouted loudly while standing in the middle of the pile of excrement. As soon as he opened his mouth, a few flies flew to the right place, causing him to retch instantly. At the same time, he lost his balance and fell in the middle of the pile of excrement. At the same time, new excrement was constantly being created behind him. Ugh, this is your revenge. No, I have to go back first, it's too disgusting. Prawalton looked at the scene in front of her from a distance, her eyes full of surprise. Jiang Hai was really too careless and disgusting. She was about to throw up. Looking at Prawalton running away, Jiang Hai scratched his head. He did not expect the effect to be so good. Chapter 695. To use a phrase from the game, the effect was outstanding, although he didn't know what outstanding meant. Looking at Roland Shallider, who was vomiting and pooping at the same time, Jiang Hai smiled wickedly and returned to his exhibition hall. He felt pretty good about his revenge. After a while, Belle came back and changed back into his own clothes. That Willie Barton had been knocked out by him, and the whole thing had been completed without anyone noticing. Jiang Hai was quite pleased with Belle. Having such a capable general had indeed saved him a lot of trouble. He picked up his phone and transferred $100,000 to Jiang Hai's bank account. It wasn't a payment, but a reward. After all, Jiang Hai wasn't short of money. Although Jiang Hai didn't say it explicitly, Belle naturally knew what the money was about. He smiled at Jiang Hai and then went back to taking care of the cows. It was said that no man could get rich without a windfall, and no horse could get fat without feeding at night. Right now, Belle probably hoped that more people would come to make trouble for Jiang Hai. Not long after Prawalton came back, he left with his team. They still wanted to check out the other exhibition halls. Without the cow dung in front of the door, a lot of people came to Jiang Hai's exhibition hall this time. It was indeed because Jiang Hai's cows were really good. They didn't need to be dissected, but they could tell that the cows were big, muscular, and had beautiful hair. There was no mucus in their eyes, and they were quite bright. Their teeth were also very well developed, very white, and very neat. They didn't have bad breath or stuck teeth. In the eyes of almost all farm owners, such cows were the best breeding cattle. In the eyes of the restaurant owners and butchers, they were extremely precious and good breeds. Yesterday, there was a terrible stench. Today, there was no smell, and it was indeed much more comfortable. And most importantly, Jiang Hai's cows didn't smell much different. It was almost the same as the smell of a strong man who had just finished playing basketball. There was a slight smell of sweat, but if one wasn't very close to the cows, it would be almost undetectable. As soon as the air circulated, it would disappear. Many people came to Jiang Hai's exhibition hall to ask about the cows. Although Jiang Hai and his team didn't plan to expand their sales and do business with these people, they didn't know who among these people were judges, so they could only receive all of them. Everyone spent the morning busy. At noon, the tourists went to eat, and Jiang Hai ordered takeout. The brand of pizza that Jiang Hai ordered was Fireside Pizza. It was a local pizza brand in Texas, but it was in Dallas. It was also the only one of the 10 best pizzas in the United States that wasn't in New York or Chicago. This was not a very famous old store. It had only been established for about 10 years. In the beginning, it was run in a dilapidated hut in Dallas. Later, the store became very popular and opened many branches. There was one nearby. The pizza in this restaurant was baked by a charcoal stove, and there were many flavors to choose from. The best ones were chicken sausage pizza, spiced roast chicken pizza, prosciutto pizza, and Parmesan pizza. As for the best pizza in the United States, it was in Brooklyn. Pizza Hut, which was famous in China, wasn't even on the list in the United States. Pizza Hut was the best pizza in the United States. The best pizza in the United States was the less famous pizza. Shanghai and the others were all big eaters. One person could finish a 13-inch pizza, so these things were not a problem. Shanghai ordered pure meat pizzas, prosciutto pizza, and a Texas-style pizza. Although Shanghai didn't like the people here, the pizza here was still very good. There was thick beef and thick cheese. As soon as they opened it, the smell of cheese made their noses twitch unconsciously. It was really fragrant and very strong. Grabbing a piece, they didn't need to say much. For large pizzas entered Shanghai's and the others' stomachs at a speed visible to the naked eye. Of course, eating pizza was definitely indispensable with cola. Pizza and cola were the real perfect match. After eating and drinking, everyone sat on the chairs and enjoyed this rare leisure time. In the afternoon, it was time to get busy again. However, after Shanghai lay down for a while, he remembered that he still had to call Du Feynman. Therefore, he told Robbins Garcia to take a look at the exhibition hall first before he went to the side to broadcast the news to Du Feynman. There was a time difference between the United States and Dubai. Dubai was 8 hours faster than the United States. Now, when Shanghai called, it was past 12 o'clock. In Dubai, it was almost 9 o'clock in the evening. Of course, people like Du Feynman wouldn't rest at 9 o'clock in the evening. When Shanghai called, he was high. The electronic dance music next to him almost made Shanghai's ears hurt. "Hello, Jiang. Why are you calling me at this time?" Du Feynman said excitedly to Shanghai while covering his ears. "Find a quiet place where there is no one and listen to me," Shanghai said loudly when he heard Du Feynman's voice. After Du Feynman heard Shanghai's words, he heard footsteps and the sound of the door closing. Then, the music on the other side of the phone instantly became softer. At this time, Du Feynman also asked Shanghai, "Well, I'm out. What's the matter?" When he heard Shanghai's words, he also felt that Shanghai should have something to say to him, so it was necessary to listen carefully. "It's like this. Today, a man named Luke Sean came to buy grass from me. He has his own testing center. He said that you sent my grass to his testing center and even sent it to famous testing centers all over the world. So, he knows that the composition of my grass is very unusual, so he came to buy grass from me today. I just want to ask, what do you think? If you don't trust my grass, you can use the testing center of Dubai's royal family. I'm very unlucky that you did this. You know, I don't want too many people to notice me." Hearing that Du Feynman had come to a quiet place, Shanghai said slowly. In fact, this matter was indeed a little troublesome for Shanghai, but it was not as troublesome as he said. After all, he was still building his brand. However, Du Feynman actually let the grass out. It was no wonder that Shanghai scared him.
What? I didn't know about this.
"The grass you gave me, I first sent it to the Royal Testing Center. After the composition was determined, I didn't do any more testing. What's going on? How could it be from my place?" Listening to Shanghai's words, Du Feynman was even more surprised. He knew that in this world, Shanghai's grass was the most precious treasure in the cattle industry. If Shanghai's grass was leaked out, people all over the world would know. Even if it was for the sake of the local reputation, Shanghai would not sell the grass to him alone. However, Shanghai would not take less money from selling grass. In this case, wouldn't it mean that he was the only one who would suffer losses? Shanghai was also aware of this, so he was not in a hurry. He did not have to worry about selling his grass, but Du Feynman was very worried. "You can check it yourself. The other party clearly told me that the grass was leaked out from your place. There is a traitor among you." Listening to Du Feynman's panicked words, Shanghai did not care whether he was acting or not. He just wanted to scare him. "Okay, I understand. I will give you an answer as soon as possible." Listening to Shanghai's words, Du Feynman's mood did not seem to be very good. "By the way, you'd better stop using helicopters to drive the cows in your ranch. No matter how quiet the helicopter is, it's still noisy. It's easy to frighten the cows and cause them to exercise excessively. In this way, the original marble lines in their bodies will disappear. I think you know what marble lines are, right? They're fat. When the fat turns into lean meat, your cows will be useless. It's better to hire more people than to waste my grass and your cows. After Jiang Hai finished talking about the grass, he casually mentioned the helicopter and the cattle. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feimin was silent on the other side of the phone. Okay, I understand. Thank you for your reminder, Jiang. You will always be my friend, Du Feimin said seriously after listening to Jiang Hai's words. I am also willing to be the friend of a rich man. You can do as you see fit. Okay, I am hanging up. Listening to Du Feimin's serious words, Jiang Hai also smiled. He knew that Du Feimin would solve this matter himself. After Jiang Hai hung up the phone, Du Feimin's originally gloomy face instantly became even gloomier. Our grass leaked out. Do you know about this? Du Feimin didn't even raise his head as he asked a middle-aged man behind him. This middle-aged man was the head of his bodyguards, or the head of the steward. He usually assisted Du Feimin, so he knew about Du Feimin's affairs, such as the outflow of the pasture. I know a little. Hearing that Du Feimin was his man, this man was also a little flustered. However, his good character made him admit it. Why didn't you tell me if you knew? However, he did not expect that Du Feimin, who is usually very gentle, would suddenly go berserk at this time. He grabbed the ashtray behind him and directly smashed it on the middle-aged man's head. The middle-aged man saw Du Feimin's action, but did not dodge. He allowed Du Feimin to smash his head. In an instant, the ashtray was smashed into pieces. A huge bloody wound appeared on his head. Blood was constantly flowing out, but he did not cover it. Instead, he continued to lower his head. Because this matter was carried out by Mr. Akita Masaki. He said that he did not trust Mr. Zhang's grass, so he needed to find another organization to test it and make a second confirmation. I think this is just a small matter. There is no need to inform you. Hearing Du Feimin's roar, this man continued to speak slowly, as if the person with the wound on his head was not him. Do you know how much money you have caused us to lose this time? That Akita Mango sent the forage grass to the testing institutions all over the world. In other words, the whole world now knows that Jiang Hai's manor has such magical forage grass. The nutrition in it can make beef cows grow marbled meat. Originally, these forage grass were ours, but now it's going to be distributed to the whole world. Do you know what this means? It means that our income has been halved. Even if a beef cow is sold for $50,000, a million cows would be $50 billion. And your opinion has caused me to lose too. $5 million. What do you think now? Grabbing the man's hair, Du Feimin made him look at his face. His eyes were spitting fire, and he really wanted to kill him. Hearing Du Feimin's words, this man could not help but feel a little surprised. He did not expect things to turn out this way. The great Mr. Du Feimin Weha Muhammad bin Rashid Al Maktoum, I didn't know that you were sure this kind of grass would have this kind of effect. In my opinion, Mr. Jiang is more like a swindler than a person we can work with. Looking at Du Feimin, this middle-aged man decided to tell the truth. He also did not think that Jiang Hai's grass would have any effect. Otherwise, he would definitely not have agreed. Are you stupid? Are you stupid? Didn't the testing report of our royal family state clearly? Hearing that this man still dared to talk back, Du Feimin also shouted loudly. He was about to go crazy. That was all money, a lot of money. What if the inspection center's report is wrong? You are the ones who will suffer losses. However, the middle-aged man still didn't think that he had done anything wrong, so he said calmly. Hearing his words, Du Feimin went up and kicked him down. This guy really made him too angry. He really wanted to kill him now. However, although this person was not a member of the royal family, he still had some of the royal family's power. The reason why he followed him was actually because the current chief wanted to keep an eye on him. He could beat him up, but he could not kill him. This was also the thing that made Du Feimin the most angry now. Pass down my order immediately. Get all the grass back. I hope it's not too late. As for Akita Masaki, Arrest him for commercial espionage. Those Japanese, arrest all of them. Bastards, bastards, bastards. Stroking his hair, Du Feynman knew that he had to calm down. Now, he had to deal with how to clean up this mess. Jiang Hai's grass was exposed, and it did have some impact on Jiang Hai. However, he did not have to worry about the sales of his grass. But what about his own side? He could have taken all the grass for himself, but now he had to give it up. His heart ached. Chapter 696. For some people, it was very important for everyone to earn money together, and harmony brought wealth. But for some people, they did not need to make money peacefully. They could make their own decisions. For example, the situation in Dubai. Whether it was their tourism industry or their oil, the royal family had the final say in everything. It was that simple. There was no democracy, no one could interfere with them, and there were no messy things. Everything was decided by them. They could not give up any benefits and keep everything for themselves. They had such a habit. It was the same for oil, and it was the same for beef. Since they had already reached an agreement with Jiang Hai, then these things were theirs. It was as simple as that. Now that this news was leaked out, it was almost like taking money out of their pockets. It would be strange if they didn't get angry. Hearing Du Feynman's words, his subordinates immediately took action. At this time, in their desert ranch, Akita Masaki looked at the few pages of reports in his hands. His face was full of disbelief. From the beginning, he did not believe that cows could grow marbled beef after eating Jiang Hai's pasture. Yes, he did not believe it. In fact, no one in their right mind would believe it, especially those who raised cattle themselves. Take Wagyu as an example. It was extremely difficult to make a cow grow marbled patterns, especially beautiful marbled patterns. It almost required 1 to 2, or even 1 to 1 to raise beef cows. The amount of exercise, the speed, the route, and even the posture of the cow every day had to be calculated. At the same time, letting the cow drink red wine was to relax. Giving the cow massages was to make the marbled beef grow according to their imagination. Only such a grown Wagyu could have special, marbled patterns. It was also Japan's absolute God-grade beef in the beef industry. It was 5A grade beef. But now, someone suddenly came and said that what they were doing was wrong. It was actually very easy to raise marbled beef. They only needed to feed him grass. Which normal person would believe this? They worked so hard to raise their beef, but they couldn't do it just by feeding him grass? Wasn't this bullsh*t? This was the same as what Choshan Mengwu knew about the Dali pill in Huaxia. It was definitely a lie. But the biggest problem was that Du Feynman believed this without a doubt. This was awkward. So he had been thinking of ways to expose Jiang Hai. At the end of last month, Jiang Hai's first batch of pasture was sent over. Du Feynman directly asked people to carefully select 200,000 beef cows for testing. As the commander here, it was not difficult for Akita Masaki to get the pasture. Thus, he convinced the people around Du Feynman to send out these forage grasses to the testing centers he knew of. These testing centers were from Japan, Korea, the United States, and even Europe. It was not that he did not believe the test results from Dubai, but it was hard for him to convince himself that it was true. And Du Feynman's follower was actually sent by the royal family to monitor him. After all, before the current chief succeeded to the throne, Du Feynman also had the right of succession, and his position was not low. Moreover, he had also obtained a large amount of wealth from his grandfather and father, so it was very normal to send someone to keep an eye on him. Du Feynman also had no intention of resisting. Bringing someone with him could make the chief feel at ease. In his opinion, this kind of thing actually had more advantages than disadvantages. Compared to political power, he was more interested in doing business. This was also the reason why he did not resist. This person was only in charge of monitoring, but he himself did not know much about beef farming. Compared to Jiang Hai, that arrogant Huaxia person, he preferred an extremely humble Japanese person. So, when Akita Masaki said this, he agreed. However, he did not expect that his agreement would almost cost him his life. Du Feynman would not be able to kill him. But if he reported this matter, it would definitely be reported, and then the chief would definitely not spare him. The loss of tens of billions of dollars that year was not something that a small monitor like him could decide. Looking at the test reports in his hand, Akita Masaki roared in disbelief. This is impossible. This is impossible. This is absolutely impossible. How can this guy's pasture be so nutritious? This must be a mistake. These reports were the test reports of the pasture he sent out. The inspectors were also from Japan and Korea, which he trusted the most. But the contents were almost exactly the same as the test reports here in Dubai. This did not mean that Jiang Hai's pasture was good. It just meant that the testing agencies all over the world were broken, all broken because this was impossible. He just did not believe it. Bang! But just as he was struggling alone here, the door of his room was kicked open, and then a group of Dubai soldiers poured in from the outside. Looking at these Dubai soldiers, Akita Masaki was a little confused. He was very familiar with these Dubai soldiers. According to Du Feynman, these Dubai soldiers were here to protect the safety of this place. After all, there were still some dangers in the desert, but these people who were here to protect were sometimes people who wanted to kill. Mr. Akita, you are temporarily detained because you are suspected of a commercial espionage case. During this time, you can't leave here and our site. Wait for the Dubai police to come and pick you up. Otherwise, we can't guarantee your safety. Looking at the stunned Akita Masaki, one of these soldiers said to Akita Masaki in a deep voice. Hearing his words, Akita Masaki was also dumbfounded. What the hell is this? Tonight in Dubai was destined to be a sleepless night. Around 2:00 in the middle of the night, the Dubai police helicopter flew over the ranch and took away all the Japanese people, including Akita Masaki, and arrested them in the Dubai police station on the charge of commercial espionage. What awaited them was the Japanese. Well, it depended on whether the Japanese were willing to pay for these people. However, the matter of Jiang Hai's pasture was still spread out. Although they immediately pursued it, Dubai only recovered about 30 pasture. These pasture were all from Europe. Europeans looked down on Asians. Huaxia, Japan, and South Korea were the same. Therefore, these European testing agencies did not rush to test the pasture after receiving it. Instead, they were busy with their own matters and would wait until they had time. However, this time made them miss an opportunity to open a new door to the world of beef cattle. On the contrary, the testing agencies of other countries had obtained quite amazing news. Among them, Japan and South Korea were the most active. However, if they wanted to contact Jiang Hai, they would need an opportunity on the other side. Jiang Hai was very calm. After the phone call, he didn't care about the upheaval in Dubai. It had nothing to do with him. He was still looking after his exhibition hall. There was nothing to do in the afternoon. Jiang Hai was also very happy here. After returning in the evening, he specially celebrated with Cheryl and Prawalton. Today's victory was a little disgusting, but it was really cool. Especially when he thought of Roland Shalad's appearance yesterday, Jiang Hai felt so good from head to toe. Especially the scene of him lying in the poop, vomiting and pooping, it was really picturesque. However, on the other side, Roland Shalad really wanted to die at this time. Today, he made the biggest scene in his life. After doing that in the morning, he immediately left to take a bath. No, it could be said that he took a bath for the whole day. His skin was about to be scrubbed off, and his hair was about to be washed off, but he still felt as if he was exuding a stench all over his body. In addition, his stomach kept growling. After taking a bath, he immediately went to the toilet. It was really torturous. Until 10:00 in the evening, Roland Shalad looked like he had just eaten something he shouldn't have eaten, such as poison or something like that, and then had sex with 10 women. His face was almost peeled off. His whole body was swollen with blisters. His face was dark, his eyes were blue, and his face was pale. To be honest, he didn't even need to put on makeup if he wanted to shoot a zombie movie. He could directly appear on screen. Dragging his body that was about to fall apart, he slowly made his way to the bed in his room. Then he laid down on the bed. He hadn't eaten or drunk anything for the entire day and only had diarrhea. When he recalled the scene from this morning, he wanted to vomit again. "Mr. Roland, are you okay? Do you want to go to the hospital?" Looking at his appearance, The female assistant next to him hesitated and asked him. Hearing her words, Roland Shalid shook his head. He wasn't sure if he could walk to the hospital. Did you find out what happened? Squinting his eyes, Roland Shalid asked the assistant behind him. What are you talking about? Hearing his words, the female assistant hesitated for a moment and asked, Tell me what you found out. Roland Shalid glanced at the female assistant. Usually, Roland Shalid found this female assistant with a big chest very pleasing to the eye. Why was her IQ not enough today? What do you think I'm asking about? Oh, about our employees' diarrhea. The report has come out. It seems to have nothing to do with the bottled water company because the remaining water was tested. The bacteria in the water did not exceed the limit, and the quality of the water was also fine. We also ruled out the addition of chemical ingredients, so... Hearing Roland Shalid's slightly dissatisfied words, the assistant immediately said. Hearing her words, Roland Shalid couldn't help but be stunned. He was sure that this matter must be Jiang Hai's doing. Originally, he thought that if it was Jiang Hai who poisoned the water, he would directly call the police to arrest him, but what's the situation now? No problem? What the F***? Listening to the assistant's words, Roland Shalid couldn't help but say angrily. We also found Willie Barton, but he doesn't remember how he lost the trolley. He only remembers that when he was pushing the trolley here, someone suddenly hit him on the back of his head, and then he fainted. When he woke up, it was already afternoon. Looking at the report in her hand, the female assistant hesitated for a moment and said to Roland Shalid in front of her, Who the F***? Eat more. This bastard, he must have done it. It must have been him. Hearing that there was no evidence, Roland Shalid was about to go crazy. When did he suffer such a big loss? If it was an ordinary what could he do without evidence? But the problem is that Jiang Hai is not an ordinary This is awkward. It is impossible for him to use his own power to deal with Jiang Hai. After all, this is the United States, a world where everything is about evidence and freedom. If he dares to frame Jiang Hai. Of course, Jiang Hai is not so easy to frame, but if they are found out, no one can save them. This is the biggest difference between the two, the difference in power. Now, even if Roland Shalid knows that today's matter is definitely related to Jiang Hai, there is no evidence. He can't do anything to Jiang Hai. When he thought of this, he felt that he was going crazy. Tomorrow, go and inform all the cowboys in our company. Tomorrow, we will flood Jiang Hai's exhibition hall with cow dung. After thinking about it, it is impossible to take revenge on Jiang Hai officially, so he has to use his own way. Thinking of his embarrassing appearance today, he couldn't help but gnash his teeth, but when he gritted his teeth, he felt as if there was something in his mouth, and he couldn't help retching. No, I have to brush my teeth again. Waving his hand, Roland Shalid ran into the bathroom. Looking at Roland Shalid's appearance, the assistant wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. In the end, he went to convey Roland Shalid's order. At this time, Jiang Hai is also prepared for his revenge. In the evening, he specially went to the person in charge of this exhibition and spent $200,000 to strengthen the security around his exhibition hall. This is to prevent the other party from using the same trick as the other day. Jiang Hai is rich, and he is not afraid to compete with others. He doesn't care about money. He just watched Jiang Hai spend $200,000. Naturally, the organizer here has nothing to say. He immediately sent more people to Jiang Hai's exhibition hall. Tomorrow, 40 security guards will be responsible for the security of Jiang Hai's exhibition hall. Since there is no way to coexist peacefully, they will hurt each other. In the blink of an eye, the next morning, after Jiang Hai and the others sent the cows to the exhibition hall, the 40 security guards arrived. Jiang Hai asked Bell to command them while he waited for Roland Shalid to arrive. However, Roland Shalid didn't come, but someone else did. Chapter 697. Mr. Jiang Hai, we meet again. Luke Shan walked over with his son and said to Jiang Hai with a smile, Oh, you're here. Seeing Luke Shan and Anthony Shan walking over, Zhang Hai was stunned for a moment. Indeed, he had forgotten about the father and son, but now that he saw them, he remembered and greeted them with a smile. I wonder what you've thought about what we talked about yesterday? Luxan looked at Zhang Hai and said with a smile. For them, it was very important to be on good terms with Zhang Hai and get Zhang Hai's forage. Oh, I asked yesterday. I can sell the forage to you, but the price isn't low. Listening to their words, Zhang Hai thought for a moment and said seriously. Indeed, he could get a lot of money just by selling grass. Originally, he wasn't too interested in territory, but now, if the business of selling grass was good, then wouldn't he be able to expand his territory? In Winthrop, there were many small and medium-sized ranches around Zhanghai. If he merged with them and only raised grass instead of cattle, it would be enough for Zhanghai to make a lot of money. This was also the first time that Zhanghai had some ideas about territory. We naturally understand the price. Your forage is a monopoly, so the price is still set by you. As long as it's acceptable, I'll buy it. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Luxan said with a serious face. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also thought about it. I'll also tell you the bottom line. The forage I sold to Du Feimin was $200 per ton, but he was responsible for the transportation. If you're responsible for the transportation, I'll also give you $200 per ton. After thinking for a moment, Zhang Hai said directly to Luxan. Of course, Zhang Hai's words were not true. How could Zhang Hai sell the forage to Du Feimin for $200 per ton? It was $150. However, for Luxan, it would be a waste if Zhang Hai did not earn his money. He would not be polite to him. Listening to Zhang Hai's price, Luxan couldn't help but secretly click his tongue. Ordinary pasture, even the best pasture, would only cost about $12 per ton. After all, this was just pasture, not gold bars. Many northern cities, such as Montana, would also have snow during winter. At this time, the ranches there would need to buy pasture. Otherwise, what would the livestock eat during winter? He had thought that Zhang Hai would only offer 5 times the price, but to his surprise, Zhang Hai demanded $200, which wasn't cheap at all. Let me do the math for you. Take my Angus cattle as an example. After all, they're small to medium-sized breeds, and each cow eats about 10 to 20 kilograms of fodder a day, which is 3,650 to 7,300 kilograms a year. If you use the price of the fodder, it'll be about $700 to $1,400. But I can guarantee that you'll grow 5% of premium marbled beef. A cow weighs 750 kilograms, and there'll be 450 kilograms left after slaughter. 5% of that is 22.5 kilograms. 1 pound of premium grade A beef is worth nearly $17,000 based on the purchase price, which is $375 per pound. The rest of the beef will also be of premium grade, which is $130 per pound, and definitely won't be any less than that. In that case, you can sell the cow for nearly $50,000, including the skin and other parts. If you're rearing a big cow, the price will be different. But for this cow, you only spend about $1,000 on it, plus a year's worth of labor and fodder for me. Looking at Luxan in front of him, Zhang Hai spoke slowly. He wasn't worried that Luxan wouldn't buy it. He had a monopoly on this kind of forage. What was a monopoly? It meant that he was the only one in the world who had this kind of forage. If Luxan wanted to make more money, he had to cooperate with him. $200. To be honest, this is really expensive, but I can accept this price. But the transportation, to be honest, the transportation of forage isn't cheap. He hesitated for a moment. In fact, as Zhang Hai said, if he could really calculate it that way, an Angus cow could bring him $50,000 in income. After deducting the cost, there would be at least $48,000 left. Luxan himself was a famous rancher in Texas. His cattle were bred by himself, so there was no need to buy them. There was also a pitiful lack of manpower. The cowboys here didn't earn as much as Zhang Hai's cowboys. As for the $700 Zhang Hai said for forage, Luxan didn't believe it. Since he wanted the cows to eat this kind of forage, he would definitely let them eat until they were full. 20 kilograms a day was a must. That did mean that his annual consumption would be about $1,400. Other than that, all the money he made here was net profit. After deducting taxes, it seemed that he could make a lot of money. But as a businessman, he had to bargain for everything. This was the most important problem. How about this? As you know, I set up a company called Soaring Dragon. It's mainly to promote the brands in my manor, beef, and seafood. But I also do logistics. If you want to buy, I can give you a discount of $5 per ton of forage. You can use my logistics. It's about $205 per ton. I'll help you send it to the big city you specify, and you can send a car to pick it up. Hearing what Luke Shan said, Zhang Hai decided to give in a little and help his company. After hearing Zhang Hai's words, Luke Shan thought for a moment. Indeed, Zhang Hai's proposal was really tempting. After hesitating for a while, he nodded gently. I can accept this price, and I can also accept using your logistics. But how much of this grass can you provide? Looking at Zhang Hai, Luke Shan seemed to have made up his mind about something. He said seriously to Zhang Hai, I have nearly 30,000 cows in my manor. Actually, it's more than 20,000 cows. The daily consumption is very important. When I sell the grass, I sell the grass that they can't finish. But most of the grass was bought by Du Feimin. Now that I have leftovers, I can probably provide the consumption of 100,000 cows. Seeing that Luke Shan agreed, Zhang Hai also nodded. He didn't like people who were too long-winded. He didn't have to sell his grass. 100,000 cows. A cow's annual consumption was $1,400. 10,000 cows would be $14 million and 100,000 cows would be $140 million. Unknowingly, he was going to talk about a big business deal. Unfortunately, this didn't fit Luke Shan's idea. Can't you sell 100,000 cows? Seeing Luke Shan shake his head, Zhang Hai knew that he wasn't going to buy everything. Then tell me how many cows. Fortunately, Zhang Hai's mentality was very calm. He didn't care if he couldn't sell the grass for 100,000 cows. Just like what they said, it was just grass. Zhang Hai didn't care much about money. I want 1,000,000 cows. But in the next second, Luke Shan's words almost killed Zhang Hai. Well, it turned out that he didn't think 100,000 cows was too much. He thought 100,000 cows was too little. He had to admit that this guy was really ambitious. 1,000,000 cows. Wasn't that about the same size as Du Feimin's ranch? It seemed that this guy was really rich. At least, he wasn't someone Luke could compare to. No, I'm really sorry. I only have 100,000 cows. I'll go back and think of a way. If I can squeeze out some more, I'll give it to you. After hearing Luke Shan's words, Zhang Hai shook his head. 100,000 cows were already a lot. 1,000,000 cows? Hee. Although he might be able to get so much grass, Zhang Hai felt that he would have some trouble in the future if he gave Luke so much grass. Zhang Hai didn't really want to raise cows now. He felt that he would become rich just by selling grass. After all, those cows only made a few $1 billion a year. If he sold grass, Zhang Hai felt that his annual income might reach several $1 billion. But fortunately, he still thought about it. He shook his head and rejected Luke Shan's proposal. That's a pity. 100,000 cows it is. This is also the initial tentative cooperation between us. I hope we can cooperate happily. Seeing Zhang Hai reject him, Luke Shan couldn't help but think highly of Zhang Hai. He knew that Zhang Hai sold 1,000,000 cows of grass to Du Feimin, and he was sure that the price he offered was higher than Du Feimin's. In such a situation where there was money to be made, he still insisted on his contract spirit. This was commendable. It was also because of this that he thought highly of Zhang Hai. This man could remain calm in the face of money. He was really good. But in fact, he was thinking too much. The reason why Zhang Hai didn't transfer Du Feimin's quantity to him was that Zhang Hai's most important life-saving oil futures were obtained from Du Feimin. Secondly, he believed that Du Feimin would also raise the price once the price was announced. When did the Dubai tycoon care about such trivial matters? What a joke. Happy cooperation. Seeing that Luke Shan agreed, Zhang Hai shook hands with him and then said with a chuckle, The next thing would be left to the lawyers of both sides to discuss. Jiang Hai called Moses Adams. After learning about the contract of $100 million a year, Moses Adams also expressed his intention to come as soon as possible. He knew that Jiang Hai wouldn't treat him badly after negotiating such a business deal. At the same time, he also brought people from Soaring Dragon Logistics, which was another expansion project of Soaring Dragon Logistics. Of course, this was all for later and had nothing to do with the current situation. Jiang Hai come out. But at this time, something related to Jiang Hai happened. For example, Roland Shalater finally came. As soon as he reached an agreement with Luke Shan, there was a commotion outside the exhibition hall. After hearing this sound, Jiang Hai walked out of the exhibition hall to take a look. At this time, outside the exhibition hall, the security guards were already fighting with the people brought by Roland Shalit. Normally, when the security guards saw the cart full of cow dung, they would have already run away. Who would fight them head-on? But yesterday, Jiang Hai spent $200,000 to find these people. Although the organizer and the security company received $50,000, the remaining 20 people knew that if they could withstand the cow dung attack, they could get $5,000. $5,000 a month was considered a middle-class family in the United States, not to mention that it was only for one day. So even if they knew that it was cow dung, even if they knew that the smell was strong, they still rushed up and pushed the cowboys, not letting them pass. Seeing that his men couldn't break through the defensive line, Roland Shalit was filled with hatred and anger. At this time, he was much better than last night. After taking a shower, he went to a nearby private hospital to get an 4-drip and take anti-diarrhea medicine. Although his condition was still not very good, at least he could stand here now. Looking at Jiang Hai coming out, he really hated him to the core. Roland Shalater felt that yesterday was the most humiliating day in his life. He had never been so humiliated before and probably would never be again. Now that he saw the culprit, Jiang Hai, come out, he almost went crazy. Oh, it's you. You're so free, coming here early in the morning looking for trouble? Looking at the cowboys and trolleys that were blocked outside, Jiang Hai looked at Roland Shalater with a smile on his face. The conflict here naturally attracted a lot of people's attention. But because the cow dung was so smelly, not many people came to watch. Only the security guards and the cowboys still insisted. You bastard! You dare to say that what happened yesterday had nothing to do with you? Pointing at Jiang Hai, Roland Shalater roared angrily. Oh, I don't understand what you're talking about. Looking at the angry Roland Shalater, Jiang Hai gently picked his ear and said with an annoying face. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Roland Shalater was so angry that his eyes almost popped out. He had completely forgotten what kind of attitude he had yesterday. Jiang Hai, at most, could be regarded as restoring his situation yesterday. You don't understand? Okay, I'll let you understand. Let's go. Looking at Jiang Hai's indifferent face, Roland Shalater roared. As his voice fell, the cowboys on the other side began to exert their strength, trying to break through the security circle. Stop them. But fortunately, Bell's reaction was faster. He also shouted loudly and the cowboys and security guards on both sides fought again. Okay, what are you guys doing? But at this moment, suddenly a familiar voice sounded behind Jiang Hai, and then Jiang Hai saw Luke Shan coming out with a gloomy face. When he saw Luke Shan, Roland Shalater's face also showed a look of disbelief. He never thought that Luke Shan would be here. Chapter 698. Looks like Luke Shan is just like what Pullowalton said. He has quite a reputation here. Looking at Luke Shan, who stood in front of him and made everyone silent, Jiang Hai whispered in his heart. Then he took a step back and handed the venue over to Luke Shan. Now he would be in charge of it. Mr. Shan. Looking at Luke Shan, Roland Shalit hesitated for a moment, then called out. If his SSR company was a giant in the eyes of the cowboy, then Luke Shan was a giant in their eyes. He was so big that they could hardly compete with him. As soon as Luke Shan came out, Roland Shalit was confused. He couldn't understand how Jiang Hai got involved with Luke Shan. Shouldn't this purist Texan be on their side? Mr. Jiang Hai, I'm sorry for scaring you. Luke Shan looked at Jiang Hai and nodded. It's okay, if you know these people, then I'll leave this place to you. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai smiled, then waved his hand. Bell left with the security guards. But this time, no one stopped the cowboys, and they didn't dare to push the cow dung forward. They had heard of Luxan before. You're a disgrace to Texas. Get out of here. Looking at the cowboy in front of him, Roland Shawn shouted. After hearing Roland Shawn's words, the cowboy glanced at Roland Shawn. After finding that Roland Shawn didn't say anything, they left dejectedly. Are you kidding me? Is your life more important than your money? Of course, Luxan wouldn't kill them. But if they offended Luxan in Texas, would they still be able to survive here? Compared to their future jobs, the second half of their lives. The small amount of money that Roland Shalide had given him, plus his own anger, had long disappeared. Originally, in their eyes, Jiang Hai was just an ordinary foreigner with some money, but they couldn't understand how Jiang Hai connected with Luxan. This was really a bit puzzling, but it didn't mean that they dared to disobey Luxan's words. After hearing Luxan's words and seeing that Roland Shalide didn't say anything, they all left with their tails between their legs. In an instant, only Luxan, his son Anthony Shawn, and Roland Shalide were left on the street. Luxan looked at Roland Shalide, then slowly walked in front of him with his son. Mr. Shawn. Roland Shalide looked at Luxan and swallowed hard, then said anxiously, You don't need to tell me this. I only believe what I see. Now, immediately apologize to Mr. Jiang Hai, or SSR Corporation will change owners. Luxan waved his hand at Roland Shalide, stopping him from speaking. He said in a serious tone. What? Mr. Shawn, you can't. Listening to what Luxan said, Roland Shalide said with a horrified expression. Now, immediately, do you need me to say anything else? Unfortunately, Luxan didn't give him a chance to explain. When Luxan talked to Jiang Hai, he was very polite because Jiang Hai could bring him profits. Like Jiang Hai said, he provided fodder for 100,000 cows. Excluding the money that Jiang Hai earned, the cows were worth about $5 billion. After selling them and paying the taxes, he would have at least $3 billion left. How much was SSR Corporation's total market value? Not to mention 100,000 cows now. What about 200,000 cows in the future? 300,000 cows? 1 million cows? How many SSR corporations could he buy? This guy actually dared to offend Jiang Hai. He was simply courting death. Luxan didn't ask why things turned out this way, nor did he ask what the cause and effect was. He only knew that he couldn't be cut off from his source of income. He had to obtain Jiang Hai's forgiveness. Roland Shalide couldn't help but be dumbfounded as he looked at Luxan. Tears kept welling up in his eyes. Roland Shalide was not a sissy, nor was he a man with a weak heart, but he really felt wronged at this moment. Why did he have to apologize after being messed with so badly yesterday? There was no justice in this world. Roland Shalide couldn't say anything else as he looked at the aggressive Luxan in front of him. But it was impossible for him to apologize. In the end, he broke down and ran outside after screaming. Father, should I call the people from SSR Corporation to apologize? Watching Roland Shalide leave, Anjine Shawn frowned and said to Luxan. Hearing his words, Luxan narrowed his eyes. He looked back at Jiang Hai's exhibition hall and found that Jiang Hai wasn't there. It seemed that his sincerity wasn't enough. I'll leave it to you. Luxan looked at his son and said faintly. He patted his son's shoulder and walked into Jiang Hai's exhibition hall. He saw Jiang Hai sitting there playing with his phone and walked over with a smile. Luxan looked at Jiang Hai with a smile and said slowly to Jiang Hai, The matter outside has been resolved. I'll give Mr. Jiang Hai a satisfactory answer. It's my fault for letting Jiang Hai have such unpleasant memories here. If there's time, I'll bring Mr. Jiang Hai around to have some fun. What do you think? He was very interested in Jiang Hai. To be exact, he was interested in Jiang Hai's pasture and the formula of the pasture. It was impossible for anyone who was close to Jiang Hai to not be interested in Jiang Hai's secrets. However, if Jiang Hai didn't say anything, they couldn't get to the bottom of it. If they really made Jiang Hai angry, it would be disastrous. Go out to have fun? Forget it. I need to focus more on the competition. I'll have to wait for the next opportunity. Looking at Luke-shan in front of him, Jiang Hai wasn't going to go out and play with him. Who knows if he has any traps or something like that. Jiang Hai was more focused on the beef cattle show. His goal was to get first place. If that's the case, then it's really a pity. But Mr. Jiang Hai's cow is really amazing. I wish Mr. Jiang Hai a good ranking in this beef cattle exhibition. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't want to go, Luke-shan didn't force him. After all, he knew that he wasn't very familiar with Jiang Hai, so he said with a smile, "Thank you for your kind words." Looking at Luke-shan, Jiang Hai responded with a smile. After the two exchanged a few words, Luke-shan also left. After they left, only Luke-shan returned home. As for Anthony Shan, he went to the SSR company. Just like they said, this matter wasn't over yet. The SSR company was very careful with Anthony Shan's arrival. After knowing the purpose of Anthony Shan's visit, SSR's largest shareholder, Babbitt Shalit, wanted to kill his little bastard. After sending Anthony Shan off, he immediately called Roland Shald. Ignoring the aggrieved Roland Shald on the other side of the phone, Babbitt Shald went to Jiang Hai's exhibition hall and apologized to Jiang Hai on behalf of SSR. He also made a promise that if Jiang Hai needed anything in the future, they would be willing to do it for him. Moreover, he also paid for the 200,000 yuan security guard for Jiang Hai, so Jiang Hai couldn't say anything about it. Even though he wasn't a good person, he wasn't a bad person either. A middle-aged man in his 50s acted like a grandson in front of him, giving him promises and money in exchange for his forgiveness.
Jiang Hai didn't know what to say.
What's more, in the end, he was the one who benefited. Recalling Roland Salad's appearance yesterday, Jiang Hai was naturally very magnanimous to forgive them. As the male lead, Jiang Hai naturally had to have a certain amount of magnanimity. Cough, although it felt fake no matter how he said it. 3 days later, the judges hidden in the crowd reported the results of the competition to their superiors. The organizers were transparent about this. Although they didn't know who the judges were, the top 64 steeds were posted on their website. Jiang Hai's 3 steeds were all on the list. Soaring Dragon number 1, Soaring Dragon number 2, and Soaring Dragon number 3 were ranked 17th, 25th, and 31st, respectively. All of them had entered the competition. Jiang Hai's steeds weren't ranked high because they were the most common Angus steeds, which were very common in the United States. Angus steeds were small and medium-sized breeds. At least in terms of appearance, they weren't as beautiful as the average Wagyu steeds. Plus, it was the first day, so Jiang Hai's stakes weren't ranked low, but they weren't ranked high either. After the 3rd day, early in the morning of the 4th day, the competition venue was no longer in the exhibition hall. Instead, it was in the big exhibition hall of the beef cattle exhibition. There, Jiang Hai's 3 cows were placed together with the other cows in the top 64 for close comparison. This was also very cruel. When people looked at cows, they would judge them based on their own impressions. But now, Jiang Hai's cow was really different. His cow was very docile, not violent, and not frightened. But when other cows saw Jiang Hai's cow, they would subconsciously retreat. This was because they felt the pressure from Jiang Hai's cow. Jiang Hai's cow was very strong. His cow was very gentle, it was not violent, and it would not be frightened. That soft fur was different in comparison. Those eyes that were full of spirituality were also different in comparison. After entering the big exhibition hall, Jiang Hai's steeds instantly became the star of the exhibition hall. Naturally, a large number of people gathered here to observe Jiang Hai's steeds. There were judges from the organizer, merchants who wanted to buy steeds, and even some people from companies. They were also very interested in Jiang Hai's steeds. It would be good to buy such a good steed. Some other people looked at Jiang Hai's steeds helplessly, especially the Cartwright Company, which had a grudge against Jiang Hai. This time, they came to participate in the National Beef Cattle Exhibition. They were lucky to catch the last bus. One of their steeds was in the top 60. After all, in the United States, there was a big gap between the animal husbandry standards of the East and the West. It was good enough that they could enter the top 64 while representing the states in the Northeast. However, Zhang Hai's steeds really made them have no hope of catching up. The Fat Dragon Manor over there is in Winthrop. Isn't that your territory? Looking at Zhang Hai's 3 cattle seats in the distance, there were a lot of people crowded in front of them. Far away at the tail of the Cartwright Company, there was no one there. Rosalind Cartwright, who had a conflict with Zhang Hai, was sitting on a chair at this time. Looking at the crowd on Zhang Hai's side, he heard a voice. "Oh, it's you. They have a good way to raise steeds. We can't do anything about it." Rosalind Cartwright raised his head and looked at the person who spoke. He shrugged lightly and said indifferently, "Yes, since they lost last time, they had given up. At least in the matter of raising steeds, they had no way to compete with Zhang Hai. But fortunately, no matter how strong Zhang Hai was, he only represented his ranch. He occupied the high-end steakhouse near New York, but he disdained to occupy the intermediate and low-level markets. Therefore, although the Cartwright Company suffered a lot of losses, it was still profitable overall. It was just that the gap between the two was getting bigger and bigger. Last year at the New York Beef Show, when they saw that Zhang Hai's steeds were so popular, they still wanted to compete. But now, they had completely given up. Giving up so easily isn't the Rosalind Cartwright I know. Looking at the resigned Rosalind Cartwright in front of him, the man took a chair and sat beside him, looking at Zhang Hai and his steeds in the distance. Upon hearing his words, Rosalind Carlyle couldn't help but mock himself. Give up? If it was so easy to give up, he wouldn't say anything. But now the reality was that it was impossible to not give up because Zhang Hai's strength was beyond their understanding. Chapter 699. Do you know anything about Zhang Hai and his soaring dragon manor? Rosalind Cartwright couldn't help but ask the man next to him. Oh, I don't know much about it. Hearing his words, the man froze for a moment, then smiled and said, "Since you don't know, I'll give you an introduction. You just asked me why I should accept my fate? What can I do if I don't accept my fate? Let me tell you, all of his cows have a full slaughter rate, and the proportion of the beef that is slaughtered is as high as 20%. In other words, for a cow that is more than 700 kilograms, he can slaughter about 500 kilograms of meat, and among the meat, the special grade is as high as 100 kilograms. What can you not give up?" Rosalind Cartwright looked at Zhang Hai in the distance and said with a bitter face, 20% of the special grade meat production rate. How can people live? Is there any way to have fun? 20%? Haha, that's really scary. However, you are the local tyrants of those states. Have you ever thought about controlling 20% of the technology in your own hands? Gazing at Rosalind Cartwright's hopeless expression, the man said with a smile. Upon hearing his words, Rosalind Cartwright couldn't help but let out a self-deprecating laugh. How could they not have thought about this? The big fish ate the small fish, and the small fish ate the shrimps. Such a law of survival was natural, and it was also natural in the American business world. After they lost to Zhang Hai, they thought about this idea. They had sent people to contact Zhang Hai's people openly and secretly, wanting to know the secret of Zhang Hai's cows. However, Zhang Hai was quite good to his cowboys. He had a good relationship with them, and he gave them a lot of money. Naturally, no one would betray him. Not to mention the trust between people, just the money they gave was definitely not enough to move them. Their annual salary in Zhang Hai's manor was $20,000 to $30,000. This was indeed not much, but the annual bonus was as high as more than $1 million. With an annual income of nearly $2 million, how could they betray Zhang Hai? One had to know that this was only 1 year. In 10 years, it would be 20 million. In 20 years, it would be 40 million. Of course, they still had to pay taxes. However, with this amount of money, ordinary bribes didn't exist here. Therefore, the Cartwright Company was given the cold shoulder at the beginning. Later, when Zhang Hai contacted the Walmart Group, he did not dare to touch him. As for now, Zhang Hai didn't just rely on the Walmart Group. He also had a lot of power himself. The Cartwright Company had no chance. Fortunately, Zhang Hai only occupied the top market. He wasn't interested in the middle and lower market. Otherwise, they would be in trouble. I don't know what you're thinking. I'll just pretend that you didn't say that to me today. It's impossible for us to deal with Jiang Hai, let alone be used by others. We're convinced by Jiang Hai's strength. It's that simple. Looking at the man in front of him, Rosalind Cartwright said with a serious face. He had met Jiang Hai. Otherwise, he would still have some ability. At least, he was very clear about the purpose of this guy's visit. The bird that sticks out gets shot. Of course, if the bird that sticks out gets enough benefits, it wouldn't matter. However, if he knew that he couldn't get any benefits, he would still stick out. He wasn't stupid. Oh, that's a pity. Hearing Rosalind Cartwright admit defeat, the man shrugged his shoulders helplessly. Then he left with a smile and went to his exhibition hall. Yes, this man was also one of the exhibitors of today's livestock exhibition. This man's manor was also in Texas. However, unlike ordinary Texas ranches, he raised Wagyu cattle here. Wagyu cattle were the exclusive beef cattle of Japan. In fact, many countries around the world raised Wagyu cattle because Wagyu cattle were also divided into different grades. In Japan, Wagyu cattle were divided into many kinds according to different regions. There were Xinjiang cattle, Kobe cattle, Danma cattle, Songbin cattle, Feiho cattle, Miyazaki cattle, Saga cattle, and Misawa cattle. Among them, the most famous were Danma cattle and Songu cattle. Danma cattle were originally draft cattle. However, in 1898, the Japanese government improved from draft cattle to beef cattle. They became the ancestors of the three major Japanese Wagyu cattle, Songu cattle, Kobe cattle, and Miyazaki cattle. However, the latter two were actually not that high in grade. Generally, if people in Europe and America wanted to raise Wagyu cattle, they would import cattle from Japan, which was the latter two. The real Songu cattle couldn't be exported from Japan. The real Songu cattle were the most expensive type of cattle. At first, Songu cattle referred to the cattle raised in Mekong County, Japan. Later, it became the standard of beef cattle. Until now, it was a kind of beef cattle's grade, and a way to raise them. The beef cattle in Japan were divided into 15 grades. Only the top 2 grades were called Songu cattle. Danma cattle were bought back and transported to an area in the center of Songu in the south of Yunchuan and north of Miyazaki in Mekong County for 3 years when they were 8 to 9 months old. Unmated cows would be sent to the market for grading and auction when they reached the standard weight. Therefore, this kind of cattle was more of a symbol, not a live cattle that could be bought by outsiders. But this person was different. The cattle he used this time was a Matsusaka cattle, and it looked quite good. Although it was a castrated bull, it was a good choice in terms of size and appearance. There must be a lot of onlookers. From this point of view, it was obvious that this person had a very close relationship with Japan. How is it going? Looking at this person walking back, a yellow man walked over from the tourists near his booth and asked this person in strange English. Matsui-kun, the situation seems to be a bit bad. There are very few people here who dare to fight with that person. Hearing the yellow man's words, the white man here glanced at Jiang Hai from afar, then said slowly. It seemed that he had found a lot of people, but the situation wasn't too good. It's understandable. Yesterday, Luke Shawn made it clear that he was on Jiang Hai's side. The cowboys and ranchers in Texas naturally don't dare to fight against Jiang Hai. The cowboys and ranchers in Montana have no interest in Jiang Hai. Although they are very curious about that technology, they are too far away. Even if there are benefits, they can't get it. In the end, the Carlight Company, which has the best chance to get that technology, has now admitted defeat. They really have no other way. Think of a way. Our country is quite interested in its technology. It doesn't need to be carefully raised to reach 20% top-grade beef. Our country is determined to get it. Also, we are quite interested in the cultivation method of that grass. As long as you can find a way to get it done, you can have as much Matsusaka beef as you want. Looking at the person in front of him, the Japanese man said with a smile, "Yes, I will study it." Hearing the Japanese man's words, the white man also chuckled with a smile on his face. But he has other thoughts in his mind. If he really gets Jiang Hai's method of cultivating beef cattle and grass, will he give it to the Japanese? What a joke. At that time, he will be the next Jiang Hai, and he will do better than Jiang Hai. He will become the king of beef cattle in this world. He has to admit that although Jiang Hai is strong enough, he doesn't have enough ambition. He is too casual. At this time, Jiang Hai doesn't know that he has been targeted by a thief. At this time, he is taking care of his cows. In this way, the fourth day of the exhibition ended quickly. After the comparison and demonstration, Jiang Hai's steak reputation was indeed somewhat unshakable. Especially the booths on both sides of him, they were about to curse. Without comparison, there would be no harm. Now, they were very hurt. On the evening of the fourth day, a new round of rankings was updated. Out of the 64, only 32 were left. On the fifth day, 16 would advance to 16. On the sixth day, 16 would advance to 8. On the last day, the final 8 would decide the king of beef. This time, the Texas Livestock Exhibition has a total of 4 awards. 1 gold award, 2 silver awards for bronze awards, and the appearance award. Apart from the appearance award, which was not very reliable, it was probably prepared for the big companies that didn't win any awards. A total of 8 cows could win an award. In other words, if they entered the final day, they would basically be guaranteed a bronze award. There was only an eighth of a chance. After the fourth day of the exhibition ended, the rankings of Jiang Hai's 3 cows rose again. This time, Jiang Hai's Soaring Dragon 2 ranked the highest 5th, Soaring Dragon 1 ranked the 8th, and Soaring Dragon 3 ranked the 11th. It has to be admitted that in terms of size, the Angus cows were indeed at a disadvantage. Looking at the Charolais cows, Limousin cows, and other large breeds of cattle, one of them could grow to 1.5 tons. For example, the Simmental cows and Hayford cows could grow to more than 1 ton. Even the Wagyu cows could grow to about 1 ton. Compared to these cows, the Angus cows were indeed not at an advantage in terms of size. The maximum weight of 750 kilograms made the Angus cows look like little chicks among these big cows. It was precisely because of this that Jiang Hai's steak was not so famous. If possible, Jiang Hai wanted to raise some large beef cows. However, if he wanted to raise large beef cows, he would have to sell all the cows in the manor. Jiang Hai was reluctant to do so. Speaking of which, when Robbins Garcia first said that he wanted to raise Angus cows, Jiang Hai did not understand. If he did, he could have raised something else. Come to think of it, he could not finish the pasture in his manor anyway. If he had raised Limousin cows back then, he would have. A bull could grow to 1.5 tons. With a slaughter rate of 65%, it would be 975 kilograms of meat. If 20% of it was premium-grade beef, it would be 195 kilograms. If 1 kilogram sold for $700, the meat alone would be worth $136,500. Of course, this was all in hindsight. Moreover, Jiang Hai did not know that his aura, oh no, blood, had such a great improvement effect on beef cows. Of course, if he had wanted to buy Limousin cows back then, Robbins Garcia and the others would not have agreed. This was because the taste of this kind of cow was actually not very good. Although it grew quickly and could grow to more than 800 kilograms in 12 months, the problem was also very serious. This cow grew quickly and had a lot of muscle but little fat. What did marbling mean? It was fat. High-grade beef would grow with less fat. This kind of cow could only be killed from an 8-month-old calf to produce marbled beef. However, an 8-month-old calf was actually about the same as an Angus cow. That was what Robbins Garcia thought back then. Of course, Jiang Hai himself did not particularly care about this. It was not that he had a problem with money, nor was he a saint. It was just that he liked Angus cows. This kind of cow was very quiet and not irritable. It was indeed very suitable for raising. If he raised other large cows, he would need more cowboys than just Robbins Garcia and the others. He would need at least 5 times more cowboys to take care of them. There were too many people, and if something troublesome happened, it would be even more annoying. After easily entering the top 32 on the 5th day, Jiang Hai's Soaring Dragon Manor could be considered to have opened up some reputation. On the 5th day of the exhibition, there were even some people who asked about the Soaring Dragon Manor's beef. After learning that it was exclusively for Walmart and Haisheng supermarkets, it was not difficult for people to associate it with the special grade beef that these two supermarkets were still selling. It seemed that this beef should be from Jiang Hai's hands. Immediately, many people came over to hand over their business cards and exchange phone numbers. On the fifth day, Jiang Hai's place was even more lively than on the fourth day. Perhaps it was because of his reputation, but at the end of the fifth day, when the scores were announced, Jiang Hai's 3 cows were once again promoted to a higher level. The first place, Soaring Dragon number 2, had risen to the third place, becoming a seeded contestant. Soaring Dragon number 1 replaced Soaring Dragon number 2 in the fifth place, while Soaring Dragon number 3 moved to the seventh place. The 3 cows entered the top 16 together. And this ranking was the same on the sixth day. It didn't change. At least until the last day of the show, no matter how good the Angus beef was, there was no way it could challenge the top 2 positions. In the end, after the sixth day of the show, Jiang Hai's 3 beef cows all entered the final 8. The final rankings were 3rd, 5th, and 7th. In addition to his 3 cows, there were 5 other cows. Among them, 3 from Texas and 2 from Montana had made it to the finals. All the cows from other regions had been eliminated. Of course, because this was the National Beef Cattle Exhibition, it did not accept registrations from other regions and companies. Therefore, companies from Australia and Japan, which were also big cattle farmers, did not participate. These 8 cows could be said to be in the top 8 in the United States. Chapter 700. Tomorrow is the finals. Are you nervous? Prawalton let Jiang Hai's head rest on her chest as she pressed Jiang Hai's shoulder and whispered. These days, Jiang Hai was really busy. Of course, this so-called busy was not physically busy, but mentally busy. Every day, too many people came to Jiang Hai to ask if he sold his beef cattle or if Jiang Hai's technology was for sale. Jiang Hai was annoyed to death listening to them, but after all, he was still participating in the exhibition. Jiang Hai could not lose his temper. He could only say over and over again that he was not for sale. After hearing this, the other party's reaction was different. Some of them were more particular. When they heard that Jiang Hai was not for sale, they left directly, but some people were not so particular. No matter which country, there would be some arrogant bastards. So some people began to threaten Jiang Hai by saying that they were from some company. They asked Jiang Hai to be more careful, or they pretended to be pitiful and asked Jiang Hai to give them some shares. Otherwise, they would lose their jobs when they go back. For these people who threatened him, he directly asked the security to throw them away. As for those who pretended to be pitiful, he directly drove them away and ignored them. Jiang Hai only came to win the award. He did not intend to sell these cattle. Because of this, Jiang Hai also offended a lot of people these days. However, from the beginning, Jiang Hai's goal was these low-end businessmen, so he did not care about offending them. I'm not nervous, but I'm a little excited. Let's get it done quickly. After that, I can go back and rest for a few days. Prawalton turned his head and gently rubbed Prawalton's plump body. His hair made Jiang Hai itchy. She couldn't help but pat him and then glanced at him. Feeling Prawalton's action, Jiang Hai also smiled, but when he was smiling, he suddenly took a deep breath. Did I hurt you? Sensing Jiang Hai's movements, Cheryl Lee, who was currently lying between Jiang Hai's legs and nibbling with her upper body, couldn't help but stop. After spitting out something that shouldn't be described, she looked at Jiang Hai worriedly. It's okay, it's very comfortable. Looking at Cheryl Lee's gaze, Jiang Hai said with a chuckle. That's good. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee lowered her head once again and began to busy herself with her work. Sigh, time really flies. Tomorrow is the finals, and then we have to go back the day after. After we go back, we have to go to the company and start working. There are still 2 days to spend time with you. Looking at Jiang Hai in her arms, Prawalton suddenly felt a little reluctant. She had been with Jiang Hai for so long. To be honest, she didn't know what kind of feelings she had for Jiang Hai. She didn't understand Jiang Hai's feelings for her, but her desire to stay with Jiang Hai was getting stronger day by day. But every time this thought popped up, She would suppress it because she knew that it was impossible for her and Jiang Hai to be together. As long as you want, you can live in my villa at any time. Your room will always be there. Listening to Prawalton's words, Jiang Hai also looked at her. Jiang Hai didn't know how he felt about this woman, but if she wanted to come, Jiang Hai would definitely welcome her. Forget it. I don't want to be tied to a tree like you. You have to know that I still have a big family to feed. Hee, and those little girlfriends of yours, won't they kill me when the time comes? Chi finally left, and I'm going again. Haha, well, let's not talk about these sad topics. Let's cherish the remaining 2 days. Prawalton glanced at Jiang Hai and said in a relaxed manner. Then she kissed Jiang Hai's lips. The fire of war unknowingly ignited in the room again. The night was silent. The next morning, Jiang Hai and the others had already gone to the cowshed and took the 3 finalists to the slaughterhouse. Beef competitions were different from bullfighting competitions and dogfighting competitions. Speaking of which, it was a bit cruel. It was a beef competition. What were they competing for?
Meat.
If they didn't kill the cattle, they would never know how good the meat was. So in all beef cattle competitions, except for bullfighting, they had to kill the cattle to see how good the meat was. Jiang Hai's cattle was naturally the same. Fortunately, he was already mentally prepared, so he didn't feel sad. Early in the morning, which was probably around 5 o'clock, Jiang Hai and the others took the 3 cattle to the designated slaughterhouse. They watched the butchers kill the cattle, peel the skin, and remove the internal organs. As for the meat removal process, they had to wait until they were on the stage. They had already experienced this once at the New York Beef Cattle Show. However, when they were skinning the cattle, the butchers couldn't help but sigh. The skin of Jiang Hai's cattle was really amazing. So the butcher deliberately came out and told Jiang Hai that he bought the 3 skins for $3,000. Jiang Hai didn't bargain. He had no use for the 3 skins, so he sold them to the butcher. With the 3 skins, the butcher watched the butchers kill the cattle more carefully. Before 8 o'clock in the morning, the 3 cattle were skinned and their internal organs were cleaned, but the cattle were still whole. After they were processed, they were sent to the exhibition. At this time, the exhibition had been turned into a large stage to display every slaughtered cow. According to the order, the first one to go up was the 8th cow. This cow came from Montana and was called the Hall Livestock Company. It was said to be a first-class livestock company in Montana, but it was only in the middle of the first class. It wasn't the best. Montana and Texas were like 2 opposing forces. The Montana cowboys looked down on the Texas cowboys, and the Texas cowboys looked down on the Montana cowboys. Therefore, even if the 2 countries held a national competition, the top companies on both sides wouldn't participate. Only the mid-tier companies would participate. But even so, Montana had 2 nominees, which showed that they were quite strong. Montana is one of the 2 most developed areas in the United States in terms of animal husbandry. It's really good, but I don't think there's much hope for this cow. At the side of the screen, Robbins Garcia and Jiang Hai stood together. Looking at the cow on stage, he couldn't help but whisper, "This cow looks good, but I don't know why, but it feels weird." Looking at the cow being carried on stage, Jiang Hai also said to Robbins Garcia. Although he wasn't very proficient in raising cows, at least he had trained his eyesight a little. This is a Charolais cow. It can be said to be a textbook Charolais cow. Its bones are strong, its limbs are strong, its head is small and wide, its horns are long and round, its neck is short and thick, its chest is wide and deep, its ribs are square and round, and its back is wide and thick. But there's a problem. Charolais cows are originally cows with more lean meat, so the meat of this cow won't be too bad, but it's still very difficult to kill a large amount of premium-grade beef. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins Garcia also spoke seriously. While he was speaking, the host on the stage was also speaking. What he said was almost the same as what he said. Of course, he didn't say the last sentence. After all, before the cow was solved, the host couldn't interfere too much. A few big men went on stage with meat-carving knives and began to cut the Charolais cow. One has to admit that the people hired by the organizer are all good. It didn't take long for the cow on the stage to be almost finished. At the same time, there were also appraisers who came to check the meat. After about half an hour, the cow was completely cut open. The host also reported the situation of this Charolais cow. The net weight of this Charolais cow was 1,200 kilograms, and the total weight of the meat after slaughter was 816 kilograms. The slaughter rate was 68%, which was quite good. The premium grade beef was 16 kilograms, which was 2%. The special grade beef was 220 kilograms, which was 27%. The preferred grade beef was 351 kilograms, which was 43%. The standard grade beef was 135 kilograms, which was 16%. The commercial grade beef was 41 kilograms, which was 5%. The other 4% was usable grade beef, and the 3% was minced grade beef, which was not included in the calculation. Jiang Hai listened to the host's price and calculated in his heart. The premium grade beef was $700 per kilogram, which was $11,200. The special grade beef was $250 per kilogram, which was $55,000. The preferred grade beef was $100 per kilogram, which was $35,100. The standard grade beef was $19.57, $5. The commercial grade beef was $10 per kilogram, which was $410. The rest were not included. The total value of this cow was $103,667, $5. As expected of a cow that could enter the top 8 in the United States. The last one was worth $100,000. If such a cow was placed on other ranches, it would definitely be a breeding cow or a king cow. However, in a top ranch, it was far inferior. However, the fact that a cow could be sold for $100,000 still caused the audience to exclaim. Indeed, these top beef cows were too valuable. Of course, Jiang Hai was not worried about this. Not to mention that this cow was nearly 500 kilograms heavier than his cow. Jiang Hai did not care much about the slaughter rate. His goal was only the gold medal. It's our turn. After the announcement, this cow was pushed down. Next was Jiang Hai's cow, which was in 7th place. After saying that, Robbins Garcia went over to help Bergdaler, and the staff pushed the cow up. However, as soon as the bull came up, it could be seen that it was much smaller than the Charolais bull from before. This cow is called Soaring Dragon No. 3. It comes from Winthrop's Soaring Dragon Manor. The Soaring Dragon Manor is the dark horse of this year's beef show. Even with the capabilities of their manor, they were able to produce 3 beef cows. It seems like they have secured at least 2 awards. The host couldn't help but sigh when he saw the cow being pushed onto the stage. Originally, this competition was supposed to be a match between Texas and Montana. However, now, Jiang Hai felt that Texas and Montana were similar. Now, he wanted to see how good the quality of his cow was. This is an Angus cow. When it was alive, it weighed 760 kilograms. Wow, it is considered a big one among Angus cows. Let's see how strong it is. As soon as the host finished speaking, a professional butcher stepped forward and started to cut the cow. However, as soon as the first cut was made, the pink beef was flipped out. The white marble-like fat in the middle of the pink beef was perfectly arranged in front of everyone. Superior grade beef on the first cut? Looking at the perfect beef, many people below the stage exclaimed in surprise. At the same time, more people had greedy looks in their eyes. The butcher on the stage was stunned for a moment, but he still started to cut the cow quickly. With each cut, the audience below would exclaim in surprise. It was really frightening. Jiang Hai and the others had seen this kind of occasion before, but they were still very happy to see their surprised expressions. This feeling of vanity really made them a little complacent. Because the beef was relatively small, it only took about 20 minutes to cut it out. The appraiser also walked up to the stage and looked at the beef with a surprised face. Then, he weighed the beef. Cough. To be honest, I have never seen such a cow in all my years of hosting animal husbandry exhibitions. It's really terrifying. Now, let me publicize the results of these beef. This Angus cow soaring dragon number 3 weighs 760 kilograms and produces 512 kilograms of meat. It has a slaughter rate of 67%, which has already surpassed the Angus cow. Among them, the superior grade beef hiss. At this point, the host couldn't help but take a deep breath.
It was really too terrifying.
118 kilograms, accounting for 23% of the meat yield.
Oh my God.
Superior grade beef, 312 kilograms, accounting for 61% of all the beef. These two grades of beef alone account for 84% of all the meat yield. That's terrifying. Superior grade beef, 51 kilograms, accounting for 10%. Standard grade beef, 11 kilograms, accounting for 2%. Commercial grade beef, 5 kilograms, accounting for 1%. The remaining 3% are usable and minced. This beef is really terrifying. Listening to the host's report, the people below the stage were also calculating. 118 kilograms of superior grade beef was $82,600, and 312 kilograms of superior grade beef was $78,000. These two grades alone were worth $160,000. The rest was just a small amount of money. Jiang Hai secretly nodded at these figures. Of course, not all of the beef in his manor were like this. These three were specially strengthened by Jiang Hai before he came here. But even so, according to this price, the rest of the beef in his manor could be sold for more than 140,000 gold coins without a problem. And this time, after making a name for himself, according to Prawalton, she could buy Jiang Hai's beef for $860 per kilogram. In this way, Jiang Hai's income would increase again. This was the effect of branding. At this time, the audience below the stage, after calculating the income of this cow, looked at the cow and Jiang Hai with some red eyes. Before this, they also knew that this beef was worth a lot, but they didn't think that this beef would be worth so much. Chapter 701. How is this possible? My God, is this still the Angus beef? Don't tell me he used some kind of drug. I think so too. Otherwise, how could we not know what Angus cattle looks like? How could such a small cow produce so much high-grade beef? I think the Soaring Dragon Manor must have used some unspeakable means. That's right. All right, stop talking nonsense. If he used some kind of unspeakable method, would he still dare to participate in the competition? Do you think the appraisers hired by the organizers are incompetent? If there is a problem, how can they not see it? Maybe they received some kind of dirty money? Yes, maybe they are in cahoots. If this guy really has a secret recipe that can improve the quality of the beef, why didn't he take it out? That's right, that's right. Looking at the price of the beef on the stage, many manor and ranch owners below the stage whispered. In their opinion, Jiang Hai's cow must have some kind of problem. Prawalton was also sitting below the stage. As the manager of Sam's Club, she naturally had the qualifications to sit here. Listening to the words of those people, she couldn't help but smile disdainfully. She knew better than anyone whether Jiang Hai's cow had any problem or not. No matter which country it was the same. It was very common to say that grapes were sour when one couldn't eat them. It was said that cutting off one's source of income was like killing one's parents. Now, although Jiang Hai didn't cut off their source of income, Jiang Hai had a way to improve the quality of the beef, but he didn't tell them. This was a crime. In fact, this was the United States. Fortunately, it was the United States. It wasn't that Jiang Hai cheated them, but because the system was different, sometimes the way of dealing with affairs was different. The United States was a world of rich people. It was a world of government. Although the ones who had the final say were the plutocrats, these people wouldn't easily shake their foundation. They needed to set some examples of the American dream. They would let some people take advantage of the loopholes and make a lot of money. Therefore, even if they knew that Jiang Hai had a secret recipe to improve the quality of the beef, as long as Jiang Hai didn't get in their way, as long as Jiang Hai didn't do anything out of line, no one could force him to hand it over. This was the reality. There were many people like this in the United States. Some very important patents were held in the hands of the plutocrats. If the plutocrats didn't hand over the patents, the United States government wouldn't harm their personal interests. Of course, it was another matter whether they would study it privately or not. But at least on the surface, they still maintained the principle of personal wealth above everything else. But it was different in China. In China, people paid attention to balance. If Zhang Hai's beef cattle technology really had a high value for the cultivation of beef, then there was no need to consider it in China. Someone would definitely ask Zhang Hai to hand over the technology. If the technology was handed over to the country could say that it was taken from the people and used by the people. But if the technology was handed over to someone, then that person would become the ambitious Zhang Hai. Of course, the premise was that the person's influence must be great. Don't say that this was the Black Country. Zhang Hai was not worth a cent. This was the reality. For example, the famous academician Yuan had developed hybrid rice and donated it to the country. It didn't matter if he was willing to do it or not. If he was an American after developing the hybrid rice, his net worth would be at least $10 billion. Even if he only sold the patent, it would still be the same. But in China, the country would only give some rewards. A few million? Tens of millions? Compared to a few billion USD, this was not a small amount. Of course, there was another political issue involved in this. That was the question of patriotism and how much one was willing to contribute to the country. Zhang Hai was still a citizen of Huaxia. This position would not change. Otherwise, Zhang Hai would be banned. For this kind of matter, it was better to stop here. It was enough to say it softly. In short, Zhang Hai was now in the United States. So, even if these people were envious, they could only watch. To be honest, I feel that the ranking of the Soaring Dragon Manor's cow is really low. I don't know what to say. Okay, let's calm down. Let's welcome the next cow. The one ranked 6th is a Hayford cow from Frankville, Texas. Its name is Sergal. No matter what the people below said, the host on the stage was still very calm. After looking at the card in his hand, he directly entered the process of the next cow. The Hayford cow. Although this cow was also called Frankville or Gaul, in fact, this cow was not a French breed, but a British breed. It first appeared in Herefordshire in the south of England. It was the oldest small and medium-sized breed in the world. But no matter how small the breed was, it was still much bigger than Zhang Hai's Angus cow. When it reached adulthood, its weight was between 1 ton and 1,100 kilograms. This cow was actually very good. At least it was better than the 8th cow. However, Zhang Hai's cow was in front of it, so this cow was not worth much. Although it could be sold for about $110,000 compared to Zhang Hai's cow, the difference was huge. After the 6th cow was cut, it was time to move on to the 5th cow. Zhang Hai's Soaring Dragon number 1 was in the 5th place. When Zhang Hai's cow was brought up, the sound of people sucking in cold air became even more obvious. Originally, they thought that Zhang Hai only had one good cow, but they didn't expect that Zhang Hai had so many good cows. When the butcher began to cut the cow, the discussion below became louder. Like Soaring Dragon number 3, this cow had been carefully selected by Robbins Garcia. It had shocked everyone in the previous round. This cow was estimated to be worth more than $160,000. The lightest Angus cow could be sold for $160,000. These people did not even dare to think about it. Looking at Zhang Hai, who was standing by the side of the screen, many people's eyes turned red. However, many people were deep in thought. For example, Luke Sean, who had also come over. Although his main assets were shares, he was a rancher. Luke Sean himself was a rancher. This ranch could be traced back to the Spanish period. At that time, his family raised cattle here. But later, the Mexicans came and drove them away, and they lost their ranch. But later, when the United States counterattacked, his family played a big role. In order to thank them and reward them, his family's ranch was set up at that time. With a certain amount of money, when Luke Sean was middle-aged, he had set his sights on internet companies. Microsoft, Apple, Google, even Mark Cuban, a famous internet magnate in Texas, was one of his partners. However, his shares were in other people's hands, so he could be said to be a hidden tycoon. But he knew that his roots were in this ranch. That was why he met Jiang Hai. Now, looking at Jiang Hai's cows, to be honest, he was no longer satisfied with only 5% of the premium beef. He wanted more beef, but looking at Jiang Hai, he knew that Jiang Hai would not tell him this secret. The Japanese and their agents in the United States were also staring at Jiang Hai. When Jiang Hai's cow was shown, everyone knew that they had no chance of winning the gold award. Now, the only thing they could think of was how to get the technology from Jiang Hai. However, facing their gazes, Jiang Hai just chuckled. "Do you want to cause trouble for me with these rotten eggs?" Naive. After Jiang Hai's second beef was finished, everyone no longer discussed the issue of the Beef Cattle Exhibitions Award. Even if this was Texas, even if this was their home court, the home court could not be too biased. Even if this was an NBA game, the referees could not make a shot miss without a foul. By the way, their players were not prepared to defend, so the shot was invalid. Although some people from other countries were indeed shameless, they were not shameless to such an extent. After the fifth cow was cut, the fourth cow was still a Texas cow, a Limousin cow. Although it was not bad, it still lost. Third place was still Jiang Hai's cow. There was nothing much to say. The Soaring Dragon too continued to crush the audience. Second place was a Montana cow. It was a high-quality cow, but compared to Jiang Hai's cow, it was useless. This was a natural disparity between the two. But after the horse cow, the last cow was a Texas Matsusaka cow, which was the cow that Jiang Hai had seen before. This cow, whether it was in terms of size, or the brightness of its hair, it could be said to be the best of the best. Looking at it, Robbins Garcia and the others were almost drooling. After the cut, the data of this cow was quite eye-catching. It weighed 1 ton, and its meat yield was 67%. It was 670 kilograms, and its meat yield was 6%. It was 40 kilograms. Besides Jiang Hai's cow, this was the highest percentage of meat yield. Even the Montana Dan Ma cattle only had a 4.5% meat yield, which was less than 5%. 5% meat was a watershed in the beef industry. After 5%, it was considered super beef, but it was just ordinary beef, nothing more. Jiang Hai was confident that he did not need to raise them. As long as they ate his grass, they would be able to raise these kings. "We chose the wrong cow. If we had chosen a bigger cow, we would have earned more." Looking at the Matsusaka bull, Robbins Garcia couldn't help but feel a little regretful. He had been too careful back then. It's not a pity. I think the Angus cows are pretty good. Alright, it's time to wrap things up. Give some of the beef from these 3 cows to the organizers and judges. PRA, Walton will take the rest. It's time for you to move. Hearing Robbins Garcia's words, Jiang Hai smiled and patted him on the shoulder. Then he walked out of the side curtain. The 8 cows had been cut. Next, it was time to give out the scores and announce the winners. In everyone's opinion, this promotion was a little redundant. Sure enough, when the bronze and soy sauce awards were announced, none of Jiang Hai's cows were selected. When it was time to announce the silver award, the winners were Soaring Dragon number 2 and number 3. As for the gold award, it was number 1's. After receiving the 3 silver-plated and gold-plated trophies from the host, Jiang Hai smiled and said a few polite words before leaving the backstage. When he left the exhibition hall, Prawalton had already sent a car to wait for Jiang Hai. As for Robbins Garcia and the others, they had already left. After Jiang Hai got in the car, it started and left. Less than a minute after Jiang Hai left, a lot of people rushed over, looking for Jiang Hai. Obviously, these people had ulterior motives. This time, the reputation of Winthrop's Soaring Dragon Manor has risen. Sitting in the car, Prawalton said to Jiang Hai with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled. Yes, things here are finally done. Next is the matter of the Boston Fishery Exhibition. That's your territory, so I don't have to worry about it. Now that your reputation has spread, I still need to discuss with the head office about the price increase of your beef. Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton smiled and said, she really liked business and negotiation. She felt that this was the most exciting thing besides doing it with Jiang Hai. Then I'll have to trouble you. although I'm quite reluctant to let you go. Pulling Prawalton beside him and letting her sit on his lap, Zhang Hai looked at the delicate little face in front of him and couldn't help but sigh. For him, he was very happy to get along with Prawalton these days. In Zhang Hai's heart, Prawalton's position was actually second only to Qili, because other people really couldn't help him much in business. Qili was one, and Prawalton was the second. However, Qili confirmed it earlier. On the contrary, he didn't know what was going on between Prawalton and himself. They were friends, this could be confirmed. They were partners, this could also be confirmed. But whether they were in a relationship or not, Zhang Hai wasn't sure, and Prawalton wasn't willing to confirm it. They were more than friends, but not yet lovers. But they had slept together many times. Perhaps this idea was slowly changing. Zhang Hai also hoped so. Then you have to thank me properly tonight. You'll be leaving tomorrow. Looking at Zhang Hai's face, which was close at hand, Prawalton was also a little absent-minded, but she reacted in an instant and gently tapped Zhang Hai's nose. Prawalton said with a smile. Chapter 702. Looking at Prawalton's pretty face, Zhang Hai didn't care about anything else and kissed her directly. In fact, it didn't matter if he kissed her, because Cheryl Lee was driving. In the car, the two were about to start a war. Fortunately, the car was small. It was only a Mercedes-Benz S600. The car in the back was small, so Zhang Hai couldn't use it. Therefore, he just wanted to satisfy his desire. However, when they arrived at the hotel, the thunder triggered the fire. It was estimated that no one would sleep tonight. Zhang Hai and the others didn't sleep because they wanted to make the best use of their time together. As for the others, they couldn't sleep because of other things. Texas National Livestock Exhibition closed with victory. Soaring Dragon Manor emerged as a new force and swept the top 3. Angus beef is worth $160,000. Who can stop the rise of American beef cattle? Winthrop, Soaring Dragon Manor, Mysterious Easterners. Is this the witchcraft of the Easterners or a conspiracy? Unbelievable 20% premium beef yield. Is this a miracle or a sign of the end of the world? The moment the Texas National Livestock Exhibition ended, countless details about the exhibition appeared on the internet and in some newspapers. Among them, Zhang Hai, who had won the gold medal and 2 silver medals, naturally had the highest exposure rate. Zhang Hai, the Soaring Dragon Manor, and the 20% special quality beef production rate. These words would appear in almost every report. Moreover, they would write a special book about it. All of a sudden, all the ranch owners who had read the news were surprised. Most of them began to search for information about the livestock exhibition on the internet. Of course, some of them had friends at the beef cattle exhibition, so they directly called to inquire about the situation. After learning that the report was true, almost all the ranchers and manor owners in the United States were alarmed. Many people went to Boston. Some of these people were reporters who wanted to interview Zhang Hai. Some of them were from the government. They wanted to see if there was any way for Zhang Hai to make this technology public. There were also some people with ulterior motives. They wanted to replace Zhang Hai. However, once they went, they would return empty-handed. Zhang Hai was used to keeping a low profile. It was impossible for him to accept an interview. The government was even easier to deal with. If they wanted to study the cows, they could take them away for research. They could even give them the research data on Zhang Hai's research. But no matter what, they couldn't figure out why the cows grew like this. They could also study the grass, but they couldn't figure out the cause. As for this piece of land, this was Zhang Hai's private land, so they couldn't take it by force. In this country where human rights were emphasized, it was a serious matter for the country to forcefully seize land. If Zhang Hai did not sell it, this piece of land would always be his. As for those business tycoons, Zhang Hai did not care about them. The American tycoons were more interested in the banking industry. Among the top 10 conglomerates in the United States, the first was the Rockefeller conglomerate. Their main operation was in the oil industry. The so-called Mobil Oil was owned by their family. The second was the Morgan conglomerate, which mainly operated in the banking industry. This name might not be very famous in China, but it represented absolute power in the United States. It controlled General Electric, General Dynamics, Grumman Aircraft Company, and was also the largest arms contractor in the United States. As its trust fund began to grow rapidly, its strength was comparable to the Rockefeller conglomerate. Of the remaining 8 corporations, the third was Citibank. Needless to say, it was a bank. The fourth was the DuPont Consortium. Its main business was chemical industry and arms industry. The fifth was the B-City Consortium. The sixth was the Mellon Consortium. They monopolized the lead industry in the United States and the oil in the Gulf. However, the Cleveland Consortium, which was ranked 7th, was mainly engaged in industrial activities such as the local coal and steel industry. The 8th largest financial group, the Chicago Financial Group, had 5 banks and 2 insurance companies as its core. The 9th largest financial group, the California Financial Group, also had banks as its core. The 10th largest financial group, the Texas Financial Group, started from the oil and arms industry. These were the only 10 that posed a threat to Zhang Hai. In addition to these 10, the name of Walmart was enough to block the rest. Walmart was known for being low-key, so it was naturally the best choice. The 10 that posed a threat to Zhang Hai didn't operate ranching, so the price of Zhang Hai's beef and fish had nothing to do with them. If one day they really shed all pretense of cordiality and wanted to look for trouble with Zhang Hai, then as long as Zhang Hai took out the oil futures, the matter would be settled. Some people would say that the oil futures were nothing more than some oil production, so they could earn some profit. Indeed, in the hands of ordinary people it was just some futures. But in the hands of Zhang Hai it was different. For those consortia it was different. In fact, the oil futures in the hands of Zhang Hai were equivalent to a lot of crude oil. This oil was his. If he wanted to take this oil with him and join any oil consortium, no one would be unwilling to do so. Compared to the black blood oil, Zhang Hai's manner was nothing. There were also people with ulterior motives. Zhang Hai didn't care about them. Zhang Hai himself wasn't a good person. Those who came to seek cooperation, Zhang Hai depended on his mood. If they wanted to play dirty, then don't blame Zhang Hai for letting Azalina go. Now that Azalina had appeared, no one knew if these people would be able to leave this place alive. After spending a good night with Prawalton and Cheryl, Zhang Hai and the others took a plane back to Boston early the next morning. They had to start preparing for the next fishing exhibition. As for Prawalton, she took her company's plane and went directly back to New York. She wouldn't go to the fishing exhibition, but it was necessary to pay attention to it. Her Sam's Club was going to focus on Zhang Hai's seafood. After arriving in Boston, Edward Anderson and Tommy Charles specially drove over to pick up the 4 of them. At this time, although the 5 of them were physically tired, they were quite excited. Robbins Garcia, Burke Dollar, and Belle Lester each held a trophy and couldn't close their mouths. Connerson Peters was much quieter. After getting in the car, Robbins Garcia was still talking to Edward Anderson and Tommy Charles about the grand occasion. Of course, he also talked about Zhang Hai's revenge. After hearing about such a disgusting revenge method, they couldn't help but show a strange smile. This revenge was a little too disgusting. Zhang Hai listened to them and just smiled. In fact, he didn't think that revenge would be so disgusting. Sitting in the car, they quickly returned to Zhang Hai's manor in Winthrop. As soon as Zhang Hai got out of the car, he saw that the girls were already standing in front of the villa waiting for Zhang Hai. Even Aphrodite and the others came with them. "Hey, boss, take care of your body. The fishing exhibition is the day after tomorrow. Don't be too weak." Looking at these girls, Edward Anderson elbowed Zhang Hai with a sullen face and then smiled slyly. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but give him the middle finger. Edward Anderson and the others looked at Zhang Hai's actions and didn't care. Instead, they laughed and then said goodbye to Qijie and left. Obviously, these days, Qijie's position in this manor was quite stable. "You're finally back." After Edward Anderson and the others left, Delina and Marion immediately rushed over, hugging Zhang Hai's arms, one on the left and one on the right, and said excitedly,
"What?
"Did you miss me?" Jiang Hai said with a smile as he touched the heads of his two daughters. Well, a little. Feeling Jiang Hai's hands, the two girls couldn't help blushing and then muttered in a low voice. Looking at them, Jiang Hai smiled and rubbed their heads. After that, he walked into the villa. Looking at the girls gathered in the villa, Jiang Hai honestly felt that this place gave him a strong feeling of home. Even his home in Ice City didn't give him such a feeling. He walked up and hugged Feng Yunchen, Ai Xiaoxi, Qijie, Chia, Azalina, Aphrodite, Dana, Hilda, Paige, Shira, Asheria, Bridget, and Janice. Finally, he hugged Alina and Marion and sat on the sofa. Now, except for Chi Li and Prawalton, there was only Selena Gomez, who was also uncertain. Without Selena Gomez, this house was becoming more and more like a family. Feeling Jiang Hai's presence, many girls closed their eyes. In fact, for them, it didn't matter where their home was. As long as they followed Jiang Hai, this was the feeling of home. The family stayed in this way until the evening. Then, Chia went to prepare a sumptuous dinner. Of course, Aphrodite and the others would also help. In their view, they were actually Jiang Hai's maidservants. Qijie, Chia, Feng Yunchen, and Ai Xiaoxi were at least concubines. When the concubines went to cook, they at least had to help. Jiang Hai had some sumptuous dinner on the table. After dinner, it was time for the main event. Jiang Hai was pulled into the room by Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi. But not long after he entered, he found that Qijie and Chia also came in with Aphrodite and the others. What's going on? Looking at so many people in front of him, except for Delina, Marion, and Azalina, everyone in the villa had gathered in Jiang Hai's room. Originally, Jiang Hai was still thinking about who he should be with tonight, but it was a little unexpected that so many people came together. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qijie couldn't help but glare at him. Then, she took off her shirt and threw it at Jiang Hai's face. Then, she directly threw herself on Jiang Hai. You're lucky tonight. Qijie glanced at Jiang Hai, lowered her head, and the invasion began. Looking at Qijie's appearance, the other women also looked at each other and took off their jackets. In an instant, 12 naked women in the room surrounded Jiang Hai and undressed him. When they found that Jiang Hai was ready, Ai Xiaoxi was the first to get on the train to the top. Last night, Jiang Hai almost didn't sleep. Prawalton and Cheryl Lee were still very wild. But tonight, he couldn't sleep at all. The noises started from 8 p.m. After all, they had just finished dinner. The noises continued until the next morning. Oh, no. It should be considered morning. Jiang Hai's room was filled with a strong smell, which was proof that they had gone crazy. He slept from 4 in the morning until around 4 in the afternoon, when Jiang Hai woke up from hunger. Yes, he woke up from hunger, not from sleep. Patting his aching head, Jiang Hai looked at the people around him. But at this time, Aphrodite and the others had already left. Although they also had a good time last night, they were not too tired. They got up and went to work at 9 o'clock in the morning. In their view, taking care of Jiang Hai, solving Jiang Hai's needs, and working was their duty. At this time, the only people who were still sleeping beside Jiang Hai were Qijie, Chia, Feng Yunchen, and Ai Xiaoxi. Jiang Hai hugged the 4 girls into his arms and took a deep breath. Because of Jiang Hai's movement, the 4 girls also woke up from their sleep. Seeing that Jiang Hai had woken up, their faces were a little red. You're up? I thought you would sleep until tomorrow. Looking at Jiang Hai, Qijie said lightly. Although she was very shy at this time, she was still strong. At the same time, she took the initiative to lie on Jiang Hai's chest and said proudly, Phew, if it's like this every night, I estimate that it won't be long before you have to collect my corpse. Patting Qijie's butt, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Although it was very enjoyable last night, the burden on his body was still great. Even if he has the Dragon Ball, he still needs to exercise some restraint in this regard. The most important thing is that he doesn't know if it's because of the Dragon Ball, but after Jiang Hai saw a woman throwing herself into his arms, his self-control became extremely poor and his mind went blank. This is not a good habit. It's said that dragons are born with a natural instinct. Jiang Hai discovered this point from the beginning. This is really troublesome. He doesn't want to die on a woman's body in the end. That would be really too depressing. You wish. It's just because you've been gone for more than 10 days. We miss you a little. These days, Sister Feng and I have also discussed it. From now on, Little Ya and I will sleep with you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Xiaoxi and Sister Feng will come over to accompany you on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Every night, Aphrodite and the others will take turns to come over and sleep with us. You're really lucky. Patting Jiang Hai's chest, Qi Jie said bitterly. Chapter 703. Other than the craziness on the first night, everything returned to the rotation system that Qi Jie and the others mentioned on the second day of Jiang Hai's return. It just so happened that it was Friday and the Boston Fishing Exhibition would begin on Saturday. Jiang Hai hugged Qi Jie, and had Aphrodite and Dana by his side. Naturally, there was nothing much to say that night. Although they still exercised, considering that Jiang Hai was a little exhausted yesterday, they didn't exercise too intensely. They only did it once, and didn't let Jiang Hai move. After riding for a while, the four women fell asleep in each other's arms. Looking at the four people sleeping beside him, Jiang Hai's heart throbbed a little. Unknowingly, they had also officially entered his life. What will happen in the future? Who would know? The next morning, Jiang Hai woke up very early, about 3 o'clock in the morning. This was because he had something important to do today. After washing up, Jiang Hai also walked downstairs with his clothes on. When he walked downstairs, Edward Anderson and the others were already prepared. The back of each of the two F-750s was modified into a tank. In the tank were the seafood that they prepared last night. The back of the F-650 was modified into a freezer to store the frozen seafood. Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, Robbins Garcia and the others smiled at Jiang Hai, but the smiles on their faces were somewhat forced. Although they knew that their seafood was quite good, who knew how it would be before they sold it? How's the preparation? Looking at Robbins Garcia, Jiang Hai jumped up and glanced at the fish in the tank, then turned around and asked him. It's almost done. Phew. Success or failure depends on this. Robbins Garcia took a deep breath and said seriously after hearing Jiang Hai's words. Patting his shoulder, Jiang Hai smiled. He wasn't giving him pressure. Jiang Hai is quite confident in his fish, and he believes that Robbins Garcia and the others will also be confident. After everything was ready, the three cars carrying Jiang Hai, Robbins Garcia, Tommy Charles, Eleanor Cece, Andrew Christian, Marin Rupert, and Jiang Hai's bodyguard, Knerson Peters, went to Boston together. More than an hour later, before 5 o'clock in the morning, Jiang Hai's team had arrived at the location of the fishing exhibition. In fact, Jiang Hai has been to this place before. He first saw Sh-20 Clive here, near the pier in Boston. But at this time, this place has become one of the 3 fishing exhibitions in the world. Jiang Hai's principle of wealth. This time he rented booth is very near the front, and the place was not small, When they arrived, a lot of people had already arrived. These people were all fishermen or fishing companies nearby. They were also going to participate in this exhibition. After all, it's right in front of their door, and the booths here are open air after all, so it's not very expensive. So many fishermen will come to try their luck and see if they can get some sales and special orders. The price of seafood this year is not very good, and they are anxious. In addition to them, many other fishing companies also sent people over. However, seafood is not beef cattle. Beef cattle can be transported, but seafood tends to stink when it's transported. Even if it's said that stinky fish and shrimps are fine, it will definitely arouse the disgust of the buyers. Therefore, there are not many big fishing companies here. Most of them are near Boston, and some companies far away sent some representatives over at most, with a signboard and some ordinary frozen fish. In fact, they are more interested in such a trading platform, that's all. When Jiang Hai came, the focus here was a fishing company called Tony and Clark. But after Jiang Hai came, their limelight disappeared. These fishermen are much more peaceful than those in Texas, and the people in this company have also heard of Jiang Hai. After all, Zhonghai's reputation is famous in this area. It's not an exaggeration to say that this is his home ground. After exchanging greetings with them, Zhonghai began to get busy. First, they filled the troughs given by the organizer with seawater, then put the live seafood into the troughs. This time, Robbins Garcia is very attentive to this fishing exhibition. So, in the fishing ground, except for Zhonghai's treasured Yangtze River swordfish, Chinese bahaba, and yellow croaker, he caught a lot of other fish and put them into the troughs here. The live American red snapper, salmon, mackerel, grouper, and even 2 anchovies, as well as some other fish, were put into different troughs according to the price. The other troughs were filled with other things, such as Zhonghai's lobster. Although it's a Boston lobster, it attracted a lot of attention as soon as it appeared. In addition to these lobsters, there are also many abalones, king crabs, geoduck clams, and so on. There's no way to bring sea cucumbers. Firstly, there's no way to leave the water, and secondly, Americans don't eat sea cucumbers. After these things are done, it's time for the main event. First, they made some small troughs, and after filling them with ice, Zhonghai and the others took out their already chilled fish from the trunk of the F-650. When the first fish came out, a lot of people sucked in a breath of cold air, especially the people from the fishing company who were in the limelight at the beginning. They originally wanted to compete with Zhonghai, but at this time, that thought disappeared in an instant. Because at this time, in front of them, the fish that Zhonghai took out was not an ordinary fish, but a tuna. At the same time, it's not an ordinary tuna, but the legendary bluefin tuna. This fish is almost 4 meters long. Although it's already dead, it attracted a lot of attention as soon as it was taken out of the freezer. This fish was carefully prepared by Robbins Garcia. For this fish, he went out to sea for many days before catching it. After catching it, he directly drained its blood and then put it in the freezer. It's just the 3rd day now, and it's still in its freshest state. As soon as the fish appeared, the entire exhibition hall fell silent, just like when his beef was cut by a knife at the beef show. Looking at this huge tuna, many people sighed helplessly. With this fish, Zhonghai will inevitably cause a big sensation in this exhibition. The 4 people took this nearly 500-kilogram fish out of the car, then put it in the prepared ice trough, and covered it with a lot of ice. At the same time, they took a plastic cover to cover the fish. First, it's to prevent flies and other insects, and second, it's to maintain the cold. A fish like this is extremely important. After this fish was sent down, Zhonghai and the others took out another fish from the F-650's trunk. As soon as they saw this fish, everyone had no intention to compete because this is another bluefin golden spear, and this fish is bigger than the first one. Although it's only less than 30 centimeters bigger, it's really eye-catching when put together. Although Zhonghai didn't deliberately raise tuna in his manner, there are a lot of bluefin golden spears. Zhonghai roughly calculated that there are almost 300 bluefin golden spears in Zhonghai's manor. He has seen bigger fish than these 2, so he won't feel distressed. After these 2 fish were done, Zhonghai and the others took out a few yellowfin golden spears. After taking out all the fish, Zhonghai and the others couldn't help sweating. Fortunately, they were already mentally prepared. Although they were very busy, they were still very happy. After sitting there and taking a break, they drove the 3 cars to the parking lot. Soon after, the Boston Fishery Exhibition opened. The Boston Fishery Exhibition is not like the American Animal Husbandry Exhibition, where they have to evaluate beef cattle and cowboys. Here, there were only 2 categories to be evaluated. One was the seller, and the other was the quality seller. The seller referred to the seller who had signed the contract during the exhibition. The 1st, 2nd, or 3rd place would be enough. As for the quality seller, it was the seller who displayed the best quality seafood. As soon as they saw Zhonghai's side, the title of the best quality seller, these people naturally gave way. The seafood on Zhonghai's side is really terrifying. The people from the fishing company also came over to take a look. After glancing at it, they completely gave up. In fact, according to their company's preparation this year, it's not a problem to get a ranking in the exhibition outside. But now, looking at the things prepared by Zhonghai, they laughed. Is this a joke? How can such things be compared? The Boston lobster, from the tail to the tip of the pincers, is almost 90 centimeters long, and its weight must be more than 15 kilograms. Such a lobster usually can be rated as the king of lobsters, but here, this lobster is just a lobster. Because Zhang caught more than 20 lobsters of this level. More than 20 lobsters, pushed in the tank, looks really spectacular. The abalones, each of them is the size of an adult man's palm. Of course, it's not the palm of a basketball player. It's just a normal palm. Each abalone is this big. The crabs are also surprisingly big. Zhang didn't bring any shellfish because he doesn't like them. These alone are enough to crush the people here. What's more, he has a killer move here. Although most of his fish are not small, they are not particularly big, but those tunas are enough. After looking at Zhang things, the person from the fishing company left with a bright smile. Of course, whether he cursed Zhang in his heart, Zhang doesn't know. But looking at his weak footsteps, his mood isn't very good. At 7:00 in the morning, after everything in the market was done, the Boston Fishing Exhibition officially began. As the security guards outside let the tourists in, countless people walked into this huge square. These people are divided into three kinds: people from various fishing companies who came to collect fish, and some restaurant owners and waiters who also came to collect fish. Of course, some people from high-end seafood restaurants are also among them, and some people are just tourists who came to buy some cheap seafood to eat at home. But in any case, there are a lot of people coming in. Zhang stall is quite eye-catching. It has a good location and a lot of things. Many people pay attention to Zhang stall as soon as it came up. When they saw the huge lobsters, crabs, high-quality fish, and a few tunas, the onlookers became more and more. Looking at the situation, Zhang winked at Edward Anderson, the boss of Zhang fishermen, also came forward and began to talk. Come and take a look, the freshest seafood. These are all caught by us from the sea in the early morning. You can sell them separately or take orders. Patting the sink, Edward Anderson also said loudly. Hearing his words, many people looked over. Your seafood looks really good. What's the price? After hesitating for a moment, a well-dressed white man standing in front said to Edward Anderson. Hearing his words, Edward Anderson couldn't help but chuckle. He fished out an American redfish from the sink next to him, then beat it to death in front of these people. He then cut open the belly, took out the stomach inside, and opened it for everyone. As soon as they saw Edward Anderson's action, many people subconsciously took a step back, but these are just tourists who are afraid of splashing blood. Those who didn't retreat are knowledgeable. They know what Edward Anderson means. He wants them to see the quality of the fish. After cutting open the belly of the fish, they found that Zhang fish is a little different from other fish. When the belly of other fish is opened, it will be particularly fishy and even have a stench. Of course, this is only the case for farmed fish. But when the belly of Zhang fish was opened, the fishy smell became a little lighter, and a trace of fragrance even flowed out from the belly of the fish. The blood of the fish is particularly clear, and when Edward Anderson opened the belly of the fish, there are only grass seeds and some remains of small shrimps inside. I'm not bragging, but our fish have not been fed a single bit of food. You can search the whole United States, no, the whole world, and the quality of our fish is the best. Come and try the sashimi. This is an American redfish, and see how it tastes. Looking at the people in front of him, Edward Anderson couldn't help but chuckle, then said loudly. Chapter 704. Raw fish was first eaten in Huaxia, but now it was most popular in Japan. In fact, during the gap in the middle, the main raw fish was still eaten in Europe. Don't forget that salmon was introduced to Japan by the Norwegians. The method of eating raw fish was also introduced. The real salmon was called Atlantic salmon, which was not found in the Pacific Ocean. Sashimi was also known as fish slices, sashimi, and sashimi. It was a dish that was made by cutting fresh fish and shellfish into slices and adding seasonings to it. Generally, the more common sashimi in China were tuna, salmon, bream, flatfish, bonito, springfish, mackerel, perch, mackerel, and so on. Of course, some people would use freshwater fish, but freshwater fish had many bones and were not very suitable for sashimi. In addition, in Japan, there were also quite a lot of other creatures that were eaten raw. Octopus, squid, cuttlefish, whales, and so on were also common ingredients. Although American redfish was not the best raw food, now that Edward Anderson had opened one, many people still wanted to try it, especially Zhang Hai's American redfish, which looked so good. After scraping off the scales and cutting open the silver-gray fish skin, the unusually white and tender fish meat appeared in front of everyone in an instant. Looking at the crystal-clear fish meat in front of them, many people subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and there was some eagerness in their eyes. Edward Anderson saw the expressions of these people. Looking at their expressions, he couldn't help but smile softly and began to slice the fish. The American redfish fillet was relatively easy to cut, and there was no need to freeze it first. The meat inside was more compact. In fact, if it wasn't compact, the fish raised by Zhang Hai would also be very compact, and there were very few bones in it. With the flash of Edward Anderson's knife, the side of a fish was cut. After cutting it, he pushed the fish forward, indicating that everyone could try it. Looking at the fish fillet that had been cut, everyone hesitated for a moment. In the end, they couldn't resist the idea of trying it. A white man picked up a piece and put it into his mouth. After chewing it gently, his eyes lit up instantly. Wow, the taste is really amazing. If it wasn't for the American redfish, I would have thought it was salmon. Chewing the fish in his mouth, the man said unexpectedly, and then immediately reached out to take a piece. Since there was someone who ate the grapes first, naturally there would be others who would try it. In an instant, many hands grabbed the American redfish that had been sliced. Although there was no ritual, no cold storage, and no ice cubes, these people were quite satisfied with the food. The quality of Zhang Hai's fish is obviously not on the same level. His American redfish, in fact, is not inferior to the average wild Atlantic salmon. His salmon is not worse than tuna. Even if it is not comparable to the legendary bluefin, it is not a problem to compare to the yellowfin. And his yellowfin is actually not worse than the top bluefin. The taste of his bluefin is even better than the best bluefin. The taste of his bluefin is even better than the best bluefin. This was also the reason why Zhang Hai felt that he would lose a lot of money if he sold the fish at the normal price. If he wanted to sell, he naturally wanted to sell the best and at the highest price, but fish was different from beef. Beef was divided according to the part, but fish was divided according to the type. If he sold the fish at the normal price, Zhang Hai would lose a lot. Looking at the people in front of him who were crazily snatching the fish, Zhang Hai sat in the distance and couldn't help but chuckle. Although he had expected such a scene, when it really happened in front of him, Zhang Hai was still very excited. It seems that our reputation has been established this time, boss. Tommy Charles looked at Zhang Hai and said with a smile. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also chuckled. Isn't this their purpose? The American redfish has been tasted, but I know at a glance that you are not full. Come, I'll kill another salmon for everyone to try. The side of the American redfish was divided in almost less than a minute. Edward Anderson called Eleanor Cece to cut the other side, but this time it was even faster. Maybe in less than a minute, only the skeleton of the fish was left. Looking at the people in front of him who were licking their lips with shining eyes, Edward Anderson laughed. Then, under everyone's gaze, he directly fished out a salmon from the sink. This salmon was bought by Zhang Hai when it was 4 years old, so this fish was not small. When it was raised, it was about 10 centimeters long and weighed half a catty. After entering the water, this fish was not like the seedlings of the American redfish, which still mainly ate aquatic plants. After entering the water, it directly preyed on small squid and small octopus. These things contained more nutrients and energy, so although it was only raised for a year, this fish was not smaller than the average adult fish. After leaving the water, it was particularly lively and kept struggling. The Atlantic salmon was a kind of fish that did not grow big. Why was that said? This was related to their living habits. The Atlantic salmon was actually the same kind of fish as the Asian salmon. This was also why people often sold the Asian salmon as salmon in China. In fact, there was really no difference between the two in terms of appearance. There was also no difference when it was cut open. Except for the different taste, the biggest difference between the two was that one had black spots all over its body and the other had black spots only near its fins. That was all. In addition to looking similar, the living habits of these two fish were also the same. They would live in the river for a few years, and when they were about to grow, they would return to the sea. These two fish belonged to the upper echelon and only lived in the sea from sea level to 20 meters below the sea. They grew up in the sea, and when they reached maturity, they would return to the river where they were born, change their bodies, and prepare to mate. After mating, these fish would die, so it wasn't that these fish couldn't grow, but the problem was that they died the first time they matured and didn't continue to live. These guys could be considered to be existences that were willing to risk their lives for love. It was precisely because of this that there was no record of the size of salmon caught in this world because they did not grow big. However, at this time, Zhonghai's salmon had actually grown to the limit of its size, and it was particularly thick. With Edward Anderson's strength, he was a little out of control when catching it. Fortunately, the old fisherman was extremely experienced. He directly pressed the fish on the pressing board, then picked up the stick next to him. After 2 strokes, the fish almost stopped moving. Then he continued to shave, remove the scales, and peel the skin. When the perfect orange-red fish mixed with white fat appeared in front of these diners, the eyes of the people who had just finished eating the American red fish lit up subconsciously. Just like beef, salmon meat was also divided into different grades. However, the grades were also different. The main food of wild salmon was Arctic shrimp, so the meat of wild salmon, because of eating shrimp, contained a substance called astaxanthin, which could turn the fish's flesh into an orange-red color. Salmon was only produced in 2 places, the northeast corner of the eastern United States and the southeast corner of Canada, and near Norway in Europe. Other than these 2 places, there were no Atlantic salmon anywhere else, and Norway only provided salmon to island countries. So, in other words, the live salmon bought in the domestic seafood market were all fake, and they were all chum. In some high-end supermarkets, there were some packaged Norwegian salmon. That might be real, but more than 90% of the salmon in Norway were farmed. There was a huge salmon farm in Norway, and 80% of the salmon sold in the world came from there. But because it was farmed, it was fed with feed, so this kind of salmon, after being farmed, was actually white. Just like the American red fish, the meat was white, not orange-red. In order to dye it, the Norwegians would deliberately feed these salmon with astaxanthin, which was not harmful to the human body. Instead, it was beneficial, but it was not as good as wild salmon. Most of the people here had been dealing with salmon for more than 10 or 20 years. At the sight of this fish, they knew that this fish was not farmed. Instead, it was born with this color. The astaxanthin had already seeped into every cell of the fish. As soon as they saw this, they felt their saliva secreting faster and faster. Looking at them, Edward Anderson was not in a hurry. He smiled and slowly cut half of the salmon sashimi, which took him about 10 minutes to cut. When he was done, he pushed it forward. These people did not even say a word, but directly grabbed a handful and threw it into their mouths. Oh, delicious. As soon as the salmon entered their mouths, their eyes instantly lit up. Zhonghai's Atlantic salmon was indeed not an ordinary fish. After the fish entered their mouths, they immediately felt that the fish was soft and chewy. The fish had a sweet and fishy taste that they hadn't tasted for a long time. After tasting it carefully, the taste of the fish was no worse than a top-grade yellowfin golden spear. Thinking of this, these people couldn't help but take a deep breath. Such a high-quality fish, to be honest, was rarely seen in their lives. When the people who had tasted the fish came back to their senses and were ready to eat it again, they found that the salmon was only left with the bones. The fish here is amazing. After tasting 2 fish in a row, these people were not satisfied, but their eyes were shining. This was especially true for the merchants. At this time, the fish in Zhonghai's tank were no longer fish, they were all money. Thinking of this, their eyes became brighter and brighter. They couldn't wait to rush over. pick up the tank, and leave. However, they knew that this was impossible. After killing 2 fishes, Edward Anderson didn't stay idle. Although he wasn't going to kill any more high-grade fishes, those caught fish such as mackerel, bream, and the like were also going to be sold. It was easier to show them off. For more than 2 hours, Zhang Hai's booth could be said to be a sea of people. There were already a lot of people around, but now more people were attracted. They looked at Edward Anderson's actions and subconsciously licked their lips. For them, the fish at Zhang Hai's side could be said to be the most delicious. To be honest, even some individual customers had the idea of buying some fish to eat back. However, when they inquired, they learned that Zhang Hai's fish were only sold wholesale and not individual customers. They were also a little helpless about this. However, they were still reluctant to give up. After eating Zhang Hai's fish sashimi, some people went to the nearby stalls to have a look and eat some. In this exhibition, almost every stall had fish sashimi for free for guests to taste. However, the difference was really too big. After eating Zhang Hai's fish, eating other fish was really not so good. The originally delicious salmon would feel particularly fishy after entering the mouth, and it did not have the sweetness. Those who knew a little would find that the color of the fish was also a little different. At least, it did not look as natural as Zhang Hai's fish. Therefore, after these individual customers walked around, they returned to Zhang Hai's booth, but at this time, they all looked at the merchants. Since Zhang Hai's side does not sell separately, they can wait for these merchants to finish buying and then buy from these merchants. Although there will be some trouble, they can't go back empty-handed. Moreover, the food here is so delicious. To be honest, I don't know about other people's fish here, but I am very tempted. Give me a price. Sure enough, they did not have to wait too long. The white man who tasted the fish first hesitated and said to Edward Anderson, "After all, the people here are basically Edward Anderson's customers, and Zhang Hai, the boss, has been sitting behind and watching the fun. Sorry, the price of our fish here may be a little beyond your imagination. We are from the Tunglong Company. This time, we are mainly here to promote our brand. Our marine products have basically been bought by Sam's Club and Walmart and the rest of the marine supermarkets. If you want to buy some, you can squeeze out some stock, but the price, to be honest, may be difficult to accept." Looking at the man in front of him, Edward Anderson's heart was about to bloom, but he still pretended to be a little hesitant and said to him, "Tunglong Manor?" Hearing Edward Anderson's words, the merchants on the opposite side hesitated and looked at Edward Anderson. Edward Anderson turned his body sideways, revealing a smile to Zhang Hai behind him. Chapter 705. When they saw Zhang Hai, who was standing behind Edward Anderson, the businessmen couldn't help but glance at each other. To be honest, they were all in the catering industry. Although the beef industry and the fish industry were in the sea, and the fish industry was on land, they usually didn't interact with each other. However, news still spread very quickly between them. A month ago, Zhang Hai's reputation in Winthrop had only been limited to a few northeastern states in the United States. But now it was quite popular, especially at the National Animal Husbandry Exhibition that just ended a while ago. Zhang Hai's manor had crushed DSAX and Montana's livestock company, which had spread like wildfire. Naturally, these businessmen had also heard about it. Although they didn't know about Zhang Hai and Prawalton, they knew that Zhang Hai's beef was exclusive to Sam's Club and Sea Merchant supermarkets. They hadn't expected that Zhang Hai's fish would be of such high quality. No matter how expensive your fish is, there should be a price. You can't sell your redfish at the same price as the bluefin golden spear, right? After hesitating for a while, the Soaring Dragon Manor had unknowingly become a guarantee of quality. After hesitating for a while, the businessman asked Edward Anderson, who was in front of him, with a hint of uncertainty in his tone. "That's impossible, but it's more expensive than the ones sold on the market. If you don't run a high-end Western restaurant or have a distribution channel, I don't approve of you buying our fish. Although the fish next to us are inferior, they are more in line with the public's needs. All right, I won't keep you in suspense. These barracuda, herring, mackerel, and other marine fish are all from the sea. They are all priced at $10 per kilogram. These red fish are the seedlings we bought with the latest technology. They are priced at $40 per kilogram. The grouper is $60 per kilogram. The anchovy is $65 per kilogram. The Atlantic salmon is $100 per kilogram, and the spotted prawns are $30 per kilogram. We only sell lobsters of this size, which are priced at $5,000 per kilogram, and we guarantee that they are at least 15 kilograms. The king crab is also priced according to its size, which is $2,000 per kilogram. The tuna is another matter. Edward Anderson said straightforwardly when he saw that they were interested. Hearing his price, many of the smaller vendors sucked in a breath of cold air and left. Remember the price they quoted when they went to the fishing company? The red fish was $6 per kilogram. The grouper and anchovy were $20 per kilogram. The salmon was $28 per kilogram, and the spotted prawns were $15 per kilogram. Now, Zhonghai's price was at least doubled, and the Atlantic salmon was almost quadrupled. This kind of difference was really unacceptable to these people. Therefore, the general second-hand dealers retreated at this time. They had no choice but to retreat as they really couldn't afford it. The buyers of the Gao family restaurant and some top fishing companies were considering the gains and losses. We are definitely going to win the prize of this fishing exhibition. The quality is needless to say. In fact, we don't really care about the sales. After all, we have Sam's Club and the Sea Market, so you can just take a look. Looking at the hesitation of the people in front of him, Edward Anderson said with a smile. Hearing his words, the people here couldn't help but look at each other. To be honest, Zhonghai's price was so expensive that they really couldn't afford it. However, they knew that the quality of Zhonghai's fish was really good. Now, the Soaring Dragon Manners brand hadn't become popular yet. If it really became popular, it wouldn't be easy to snatch food from the mouths of Sam's Club and the Sea Market. Thinking of this, these people who were a little adventurous couldn't help but be a little moved. Do you accept small reservations? After hesitating, a staff member of the high-end restaurant came up and asked Edward Anderson. Edward Anderson was still familiar with this restaurant. It could be said to be one of the best Western restaurants around Boston and New York. The most authentic French restaurant naturally had extremely high consumption. That price meant that they could have more choices. However, if they really used the ingredients in Zhonghai's manner, the price might be higher. Small reservations are not a problem for this month. After thinking for a while, Edward Anderson glanced at Zhonghai behind him. After seeing Zhonghai nodding, he said to the person in front of him. This month was also a trial period for Zhonghai. After a month, Prowalton side would basically clean up the Soaring Dragon Manners goods area. At that time, he wouldn't accept small reservations. However, he was still in the trial period, so it was okay to accept it. That's really great. To be honest, the quality of your fish is excellent, but we have to consider the problem of cost. We need to try new things, so we can only order small amounts first. However, a month is almost enough. We first want 300 kilograms of American red fish, 100 kilograms of male grouper, 100 kilograms of dragonfly, and 50 kilograms of salmon. As for the rest, we don't need them for the time being. How about tomorrow? Looking at Edward Anderson in front of him, the person in front of him breathed a sigh of relief. Then he reported some numbers. 300 kilograms of red fish was worth $12,000, 100 kilograms of grouper was worth $6,000, 100 kilograms of anchovy was worth $6,000, and 50 kilograms of Atlantic salmon was worth $5,000. Altogether, they were worth $30,000. To be honest, Zhonghai didn't care too much about $30,000. However, this was also a good start. In fact, these fish were only a few hundred or dozens of kilograms. In fact, these fish were only the sales of a high-end Western restaurant in a day. That was all. This was also a trial. Seeing that Zhonghai nodded in agreement after calculating in his mind, Edward Anderson also stretched out his hand. This was a pleasant cooperation. After the first business, Zhonghai and the others didn't mind. Edward Anderson killed a fish from time to time to attract everyone's attention. Even the nearby fishmongers came over to try the fish in Jiang Hai's manner. To be honest, after they ate the fish, they were also quite tempted. Just like Jiang Hai's beef, Jiang Hai's fish were also better than others. This made the fishermen start to think about other things. Why did Jiang Hai's fish taste better than theirs? Why was that? Some fishing companies and the like were preparing to study this topic and see if they could understand it. As for some ordinary fishermen, they were preparing to go fishing in Jiang Hai's fishing grounds. If the fishermen in Winthrop knew what they were thinking, they would probably laugh in disdain. This was because they were very clear about the defensive strength of Jiang Hai's fish farm. The periphery of Jiang Hai's fish farm was covered with sonar detectors. As long as a large fishing boat entered, it would sound an alarm. Although small speedboats and the like wouldn't sound an alarm, how could a small speedboat catch any fish? Jiang Hai's big idiot and the others underwater weren't to be trifled with. During the day, Jiang Hai's helicopter was always patrolling. They didn't even need to shoot. They just needed to record the boat number and report it to the marine surveillance. Well, not to mention stealing fish, they would have to pay a sum of money if they didn't detain the boat. That would be considered merciful of Jiang Hai. However, looking at the Winthrop people's understanding of Jiang Hai, although Jiang Hai was easy to talk to, it was impossible for him to be merciful because everything was ready, and it was the first order for tomorrow. After eating lunch nearby, Edward Anderson called Maren Rupert, Andrew Christian, and Eleanor Cece back. Because there wasn't a lot of fish, it was enough for the three of them to go out to sea. He, Jiang Hai, and Tommy Charles were still here watching. However, the crowd in the afternoon was much less than in the morning. Although Jiang Hai still had a lot of people coming to watch, there were only a dozen people left. Jiang Hai had been sitting here for a whole day. To be honest, he was a little tired. So he greeted Edward Anderson and prepared to go out for a walk. He remembered that there was a good drink shop in the area. He was going to drink something, but before he walked out of the exhibition square, a person stopped in front of him. Looking at the yellow man in front of him, who was only about 1.7 meters tall, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. "What can I do for you?" Looking at the man in front of him, Jiang Hai frowned and asked him, "Hi, Mr. Jiang, I'm Suzuki Murao, a member of the Suzuki Corporation. I was among the onlookers just now and I saw your fish. To be honest, I've tasted the quality of your fish myself. It's definitely the best." Hearing Jiang Hai talking to him, the man couldn't help but smile, and then spoke in stiff Mandarin. Yes, he was actually speaking Mandarin. He spoke to Jiang Hai, but although he spoke Mandarin, the disgust in Jiang Hai's heart did not decrease at all. "Stop, if you have something to say, just say it. I don't like to beat around the bush." Looking at the islander in front of him, Jiang Hai didn't have any kindness. He wanted to walk away directly, but he felt that it was a bit shameful. So Jiang Hai waved his hand. It was better to cut the Gordian knot. "I'm being rude. Our Suzuki Corporation is a fishing company in Japan. Our main territory is the station market. I believe that your other fish will sell well in the United States, but I don't know what you plan to do with those tunas." Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, Suzuki Murao said with a longing look on his face. At the same time, his eyes were still looking behind Jiang Hai. "You mean those two guys?" Looking back at his two giant tunas that were still covered in ice, Jiang Hai was also thoughtful. To be honest, Jiang Hai didn't consider selling these two tunas here at all. In fact, those two guys are more of an advertisement. Now the global production of tunas has been very low, and bluefin tuna more than 4 meters long is absolutely very rare. Some of the old fishermen hadn't seen such big guys for more than 10 years. These two guys were indeed very intimidating when placed there. Yes, those two perfect sprites. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Suzuki Murao's eyes showed a look of fascination. "Are you going to buy them? If you want to buy them, I will sell them to you." With a wave of his hand, although such a big tuna is very rare now, there are a lot of them in Jiang Hai's fishery. There are at least 30 or 50 of them, and in less than a year, they will grow to more than 100 or even bigger. Jiang Hai is patient. They will grow into giants sooner or later. "Hey, thank you very much. I don't know the price of this fish." Listening to Jiang Hai, Suzuki Murao said to Jiang Hai, "Well, 1.8 million." Listening to his words, Zhang Hai calculated in his heart. He once sold bluefin tuna in Puerto Rico. But that fish is only 2 meters long, and these two are more than 4 meters long. How much can they sell for? The 2-meter-long one sold for more than 40,000 and nearly 50,000 US dollars. The 4-meter-long one should sell for 300,000 US dollars. 2 for 600,000 US dollars. But after thinking about it, Zhang Hai directly tripled the price. But after hearing this price, Suzuki Murao's eyes showed a look of ecstasy. 8 million US dollars, no problem. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, he immediately nodded and said to Zhang Hai. Looking at him, Zhang Hai knew that he had set the price too low, and it seems to be too low. I mean 8 million US dollars per fish. Zhang Hai doubled the price. 8 million US dollars per fish. Well, no problem. But after hearing Zhang Hai's words, Suzuki Murao just hesitated for a moment and nodded seriously. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but start cursing in his heart. How much is this game worth? I'm talking about US dollars, not yen. In the end, Zhang Hai still hesitated and said to him, Yes, I'm talking about US dollars too. After all, we are standing on this land now, and yen is not much different from waste paper here. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Suzuki Murao smiled, then looked at Zhang Hai with a serious face and said, It seems that he is determined to get it. Well, okay. Although he still set a low price, the price has already been called. Zhang Hai is a person who cares about his face, so he is embarrassed to ask for it back. Besides, the 2 fish sold for 3.6 million US dollars. Zhang Hai is quite satisfied. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.